Meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, folks, just a couple reminders before we get into the agenda. COVID transmission is high again for Androscoggin County, and so if folks with masks, that'd be great, but that's all I'm going to say about it. We're also going to do a couple of different things on the agenda right after the minutes and before we get into the budget line items. What else was there? Oh, and for the recording, again, please make sure that you are speaking into the mic and holding your hand up so that they can catch all of the votes. I will normally say and call the vote when we're ready, okay? All right, let's do our roll call. I am here. Steve Morgan,
Here.
Caleb Roebuck,
Here.
Walter Hill, Tony Rennie,
Here.
Michael Stefanik,
Here.
Alan Ward,
Here.
Mark Lunt,
Here.
Counselor Milks,
Here.
Larry Pelletier,
Here.
Bill Kroll,
Here.
Andy Titus, Kevin Nichols,
Present.
Lisa Cesare.
Here.
Awesome. So that's 13 folks here tonight. A reminder that 11 binds our votes, sending them back to the county commission. Do I hear a motion to consider the September 22nd budget committee minutes for approval?
So moved.
Who was that? Thank you, Kevin.
I'll second that.
Nichols, Morgan. Any discussion? All those in favor? Great job, everyone. 13-0. Oh, sorry about that. All those abstaining? Thank you.
Any chance we get out early tonight?
I'm gonna do my best, firm but fair. We'll do our best here. So let's just set the scene really quickly before we toss this over to Vice Chair Ward and then to Larry to walk us through what he gave us tonight. At the onset of this, we were looking at a 12% tax levy increase, bringing that back to our communities. So far, we've reduced the budget by about $84,000, and we've added $20,000 in revenues through our votes. Some of that's binding, some of that is not. And that's just from Mr. Ward and I doing some math on Excel. In order to get us headed in a direction, I think it would be helpful if we just do a couple minutes of talking about where we think it's acceptable to take this number back to our communities, so that it's not a big surprise at the public hearing. I don't think this means that we're just going to cut EMA and Sheriff's Department. Don't think that, of course, but I think we need to be slightly more realistic about where we want to end. You ready to jump in, Mr. Ward?
Yes, that was being handed around to you folks. I apologize, the first one, it was the easiest way to be able to do it, was just run a calculator, so it's in my handwriting. You're seeing before you the tax levy information that Mr. Post presented us that brings us back to the 12.33% to start. 1% reduction of that is $106,401. So starting at 1%, if you wanted to have a 1% over last year's budget, we need to cut 1.2. And you go up to 10%, that number is $243,647. That's for illustrated purposes. My intention with offering this was in conjunction with content of what Mr. Post provided us tonight. You see it on your table in front of you. The TAC 2022 tax levy by municipality. I asked you to refer to that one as the money shot, because that's what we have to ultimately take back to our communities to be able to tell them. For the record associated with this, Lisbon's percentage last year was 7.43, with a change in valuation going down compared to the basket of goods. We're at 7.24 this year. It's in the packet.
It was in the new packet from today, the
Very
last
last,
page.
very last page, that's in that, it's on the table. Lisbon's tax levy this year is $858,541 compared to $803,220 last year, for a net increase of $55,321. That's all in with the numbers that Mr. Post presented. Taking that for consideration, I guess I would just ask for a straw poll before we proceeded. This being our last active night, knowing that there's a placeholder for tomorrow night for a contingency if we need be, what be the wish of this group to know what's an acceptable increase on the burden to backdoor our communities? I'll go first. Mark can counter me where he chooses to, being another representative from our community. I'm in the 5 to 6% range total in that regard. Last year, the county did extremely well to do what most communities in Androscoggin County did, to put no increase on anybody during COVID, knowing that you can't just push pause and not expect expenses to actually increase over that period of time. It's really reasonable to expect that on any municipality, and I expect that the county's the same, without turning a screw, you can expect somewhere between a 3 and 5% increase with doing nothing, just keeping the doors open. That said, I think that reasonable this year, assuming a 3% over each year, I don't see that actually being an unrealistic goal of us to get to a 6% increase, cutting that number in half. As the chair actually has just presented, if everything we have voted on to date gets the supermajority vote, we're only at 11.3445, I think it is. So we've got some work to do. That said, I'll relinquish the floor to somebody else if they have another number that's in mind.
Mr. Morgan?
Were you talking just Lisbon or everybody?
I was using Lisbon as an example.
Yeah, so if we're looking at
Okay.
Lewiston, our increase is, $220,000?
Right.
So,
I'm looking
wait, no,
at,
that's Auburn. Wrong city. 240, it looks like for us.
But to the point, Mr. Post provided us at the start of this, the consolidated tax levy. The page that I've marked up is Mr. Post's work to start. It shows you that we're at a 12.33% before we started this process. This is the one that ultimately matters, because when you set that valuation in motion, that
Right.
ultimately takes that burden back to your community.
Further thoughts? Yeah.
I'll just
Can you
finish
just
this.
make sure your mic's on?
I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Hi, how's everyone tonight?
Thank you.
I'm just looking at a $2.5 million, plus or minus $2.3 million increase total. Is that, what percent is that? That's figured at the 6%? For all the counties and cities and towns?
Say that number one more time?
What were you looking, Mr. Morgan?
I'm looking at 2022, and you're looking for an increase, 11,858. 11 million, I'm sorry, 11 million, and 9 versus the 9,539.
Correct, with the revised numbers that Mr. Post is
To
giving
date.
you tonight. Correct, to date.
Okay.
Correct, you got it. Again, for illustrative purposes, the one that's got my handwriting marked up on it is just, if you want 1% above last year, we need to cut X amount. And I want
Okay.
10. Using the example of a 6% that I just said, that I feel comfortable representing Lisbon. We need to make reductions on this budget of $669,251 to get back to a 6% increase. That's just
Ms. Cesare?
So I guess the way I look at it is, yes, I agree that getting it to that percentage, but it's the revenues that are throwing everything off. It's the loss, and that's not something we can really mess around with. Because, I mean, if you cut the budget, then you're cutting everybody beyond or below what they were at last year just to offset the lost revenue. That's a true statement, or yes or no?
It's a way to look at it.
I mean,
I don't want to disagree with it, but I have ideas associated with the revenues to be able to consider when we get to that portion of the
Okay.
meeting tonight. Because you're absolutely right. Mr. Post mentioned it in his original presentation to us. If you look at where the increases are on his original sheet, 25.22% is a decrease in general fund revenues. We have a 12.28% reduction in the jail funding associated with it. So that is the situation that he's presented to us. Anybody else want to weigh in associated with, they want to live associated with this? If not, we'll move forward. I have another item.
Mr. Titus, let's go there.
No, I have to agree that I think that would be a great place to be, go with the 6% rather than the full 12%. I think that would be a great meeting ground, although, again, 6% is still 6%.
a lot of money.
But I think that would be a good place if we can find some way to make that happen. That would show that this board really tried to come up with an answer, a solution. The other thing is, of course, our revenue is going to continue to be decreasing. Is this a one-year type thing because of COVID? Because if we're expecting revenues to disappear, we really got to do something because we can't sustain 12% increases every year because we don't have the revenues.
Mr. Lund?
Yep. I think the issue I have is that we've gotten all this money from the federal relief situation there, and I can't really buy the idea that we're going to raise taxes by 12% to people while we're sitting on $6 million in cash that, well, we might want to build a new courthouse someday, or we might want to use it in the future. To me, that's just irresponsible to say we're going to jack taxes and keep the money for a rainy day. This is the rainy day.
Further, Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, my first thought was just to give Turner to Oxford County, and then we'd save $736,000. But my realistic, and I agree with your 6% figure. But I guess I would like to hear from Mr. Post in regards to anything that I'm not seeing or the justification that it's realistic to cut these without cutting someone's throat, so to speak.
I will say that there are two things that I want to mention. The first one is that the federal money that comes has a lot of things. There are some things that you can spend it on, most things you can't. They deliberately made it that way, and so the main part of those dollars, which is roughly 20 million of it, has to go for certain things and can't go just in general operations. There is some that are under the lost revenue portion that we can use.
At least for some kind of alternative to use that.
But then the second part of that is if you take and granted, it's, an increase in valuation, but I go back to my original, if you own a $100,000 house, your tax is going to go up a certain amount. I calculated the tax rate, and it'll go back to slightly above what it was in 2020. 2020 tax rate was $1.25 per thousand. This year, due to the using more of our fund balance and everything else as revenue, it went down to $1.20 per thousand. Next year, it'll go up to $1.25 something, or probably $1.26 per thousand. So at the end of the 3-year period, your tax rate is going up 1 cent per $1,000 of valuation. Now, granted, each town that, it makes a difference depending on how much new valuation they have, but a lot of the new valuation you have is based on, whether it's new construction or new, there's a whole lot of things that go into that calculation from the state. But if you really look at, and one of the things that you look at is your tax rate, and our tax rate is roughly the same as last year. And that's with with where we are at the moment.
Mr. Titor? Mr.
Just one quick question, Mr.
Mr.
Post.
Titus, there we go.
The 2022 figure says without overlay.
Yes.
Do you know what the overlay is going to be?
Not at this point, but that, if it goes to $1.26, that would include the overlay. Right now, by calculating it out without the overlay, your tax rate is $1.24 something. So,
Yeah, but how much is it, you don't know yet how much you're going to be putting to this? I just
not
wanna compare
totally.
apples to
It'll
apples.
be in the $150,000, $160,000 range.
So that's additional, but spread out based on valuation to each town. So there's more to add to this final number.
Slightly, yeah.
Slightly,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
I have, Mr. Post, I have a question. When you tried to determine what the revenues were going to be for this budget this year, how did you do that? Was it an average of the past 2 years? Did you go back to 2019 and sort of think it was going to be the same? How did you come up with what we're looking at for those revenues?
The two main portion of revenues are the fund balance, the surplus account, and you have in your books that amount, and it does show that we have finally exceeded $1 million in fund balance. However, for this year, we used $380,000 when I had originally budgeted $150, and didn't want to budget $150 because our fund balance should be over $2 million. And I've been trying to get it to that point since I've been here. And it's someplace in your book, you also have a showing each year what that fund balance is. And it seems like just when I see light at the end of the tunnel, it's a train coming at me, and that, it's being used to offset the budget or something. So, right now, we have shortly over $1 million in surplus fund balance. However, $380,000 of that was used for this year's budget. So that brings us down to $600,000. And that is not a good place to be when you're supposed to have over $2 million. The other one is the, help me out, reserve accounts. And we had just one reserve account, we've been using money out of that, and to the point where if we use any more, there's, it's simply going to be gone, and the purpose is to increase reserve accounts instead of putting them down to zero. So,
Okay. So everyone who weighed in was around the 6% mark, and so we do have some more work to do. I think,
Madam Chair,
yeah, how do you want to go about this?
I'd like to make a motion. Go to page 2 of what I've presented. The first item that we will ask to do tonight would be to vote on items that lack the 11 votes to make it a supermajority to at least send the message to the commissioners. My motion is for, under Division 1015, District Attorney 4305, to cut that electrical expense by $1,000. Again, in 1015, District Attorney, account number 4315, telephone, $3,000 reduction. 1015-955, deferred revenue, disposition revenue, an increase of $10,000. In Division 1040, building and facilities, 7,300, capital reserve expenditure, we cut that by $25,000. Division 2000, interest, 4505, interest expense, cutting that by $20,000. 2020, Western Main Transit, 4715, Western Main Transit allocation, cutting that by the $2,500. I'm looking for a second for that, to take them all in one motion.
I'll second it.
Moved by Mr. Ward, seconded by Ms. Cesare. All right, so that will take us to bind those votes. We also have unanimous votes for the other items that are not bound because there were only 9 of us here that night.
That's all of those.
In addition to that, we have Superior Court, witness fee reimbursement. Those were all only 9 votes.
Yeah, but we didn't make any change, did we?
No.
We left them as is, so my
So leave
motion
them.
is just the
Okay.
changes that we did,
Great,
correct?
okay. All right, we've got a motion from Mr. Ward, a second by Mrs. Cesare. Any discussion? This is stuff we voted on, I believe it was 9:15, when some folks weren't appointed yet. So if this seems like new information, it was in the budget minutes that we approved on the 22nd. And this is just to possibly bind those reductions.
Okay, so your motion is to accept what you've actually already done by,
Right.
okay,
Right.
gotcha.
Just to
Maybe
make it-
more
You had me
fully.
worried there for a minute that you was
No.
looking for more.
And
Deep
you-
breath.
You guys have already provided us that 1135 in the revised budget. I understand that. Yes, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Keep it up there.
I'm sorry, I was ignoring it.
Awesome. It is unanimous, so that goes ahead and binds those at 13-0. Put it in my notes so I don't lose it. Okay. Moving on from there, shall we tackle line by line and see where that gets us? All right, Ms. Molina, you're up. The public's benefit, we're going to take 1010 EMA, Emergency Management Agency. If you would just introduce yourself, since we have so many new members, Ms. Molina, and also remind us how your revenues work in relation to your expenditures. Thank you.
I have something prepared. Good evening. My name is Angela Molino. I'm the director of the Androscoggin County EMA, here to present the EMA budget. As a reminder to returning committee members and for those who are new, Androscoggin County EMA operates under the authority of the Maine Emergency Management Agency Statute, Title 37B, Chapter 13. Our mission is to prepare communities by coordinating and integrating all activities necessary to build, sustain, and improve capability to ensure mitigation of, preparation for, response to, and recovery from the effects of all disasters, natural, adversarial, and technological. Excuse me. The agency partners with public safety, private sector, nonprofit, and volunteer agencies to coordinate emergency response and recover when disaster strikes, such as COVID-19 pandemic or the Blake Street fire that recently occurred. We also coordinate with those same entities for planned events. The agency administers emergency management-related federal grants at the county level. One such grant, EMPG, allows EMA to receive 50 cents reimbursement for every budget dollar spent on total operation costs to include salaries, wages, benefits, not to exceed the federal award amount, which is $143,045. So that means we have to spend double that to get that back in reimbursement. So here are two examples of EMA response. COVID-19 response. The EOC was activated March 12th, 2020, and remained so for 477 days. In that time, 632 resource requests were processed with a 91.3% success rate. This total includes 184,765 units distributed to public safety healthcare facilities to include long-term care health facilities, group homes, and shelters. We also coordinated activities and efforts with partnerships from the private sector up to the federal government, including resource request, planning, and coordination. So the Blake Street Fire response, the EOC was activated on September 11th in response to a large fire located at 226 Blake Street in Lewiston. EMA identified and contacted resources for sheltering and transport efforts. Here are a few activities that we have worked on this past year. Natural gas leak workshop, dam failure, EOC drill, chemical release tabletop exercise, communications leader training, simulated emergency communications test, cybersecurity targeted attack training, and HAZAS modeling. That is a set of standardized tools and data for estimating risks related to floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes. And here are a few activities we have scheduled for the upcoming year. Required FEMA training, ICS 3 and 400. Natural gas leak functional exercise. Domestic violent extremism tabletop exercise. Communication leader technician training. And threat and hazard identification and risk assessment of the county. I hope that answers who I am and what we do.
Awesome, thank you. Do you have questions on the EMA budget to start?
I have a couple.
Ms. Jezreel?
There's a couple line items in here. I'll just ask some questions in general.
Yeah.
The 10, 10, 10, 46, 10, that $2,500. On the second page, there's the EOC training and exercise for 10 and the communications for 6. Can those, Larry, be used with the ARP funds to offset this for those line items based on what her explanations are in the write-up?
The 18,500?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry, can you name those again?
Yes, it's the repairs for the building,
Yep.
the communications, and the EOC training and exercise. I was wondering if that ARP money could be used to offset that instead of using, raising taxes for those, based on what the explanations are in your write-up.
I would add to that, account number 7375 for the GIS and Zoom communications also.
And so that's an annual subscription?
For the communications line?
Yeah.
Correct.
So that would only take care of it for what? Well, I guess that's up to,
It's up to determination, right, how long it actually stays there, right?
yeah.
And I don't know the answer to the question, he's working on that.
I'm not sure. I don't have an answer to that. So,
Well, Mr. Post, do you have?
You asking for a grant? Is that what you?
So are we able to take those out of operational expenses for now?
If it was, if it was completely related to COVID, so if it was training related to COVID, yes. If it was communication related to COVID, it made it very, very clear that the grant needs to be used for COVID-related expenses.
Okay, and so then the question is to Ms. Molino, are those directly COVID-related expenses, to answer Mrs. Jezreel's question?
no,
So that training and exercise for 10,000 is not?
not related to COVID, not specifically. It's to exercise, public safety, all other agencies involved, and the EOC for activations.
Okay, so then.
So all
For
activations.
that line item, why the big increase this year? 'Cause
We're ready. The EOC has been updated. We've actually used money that was available to us, actually federal money specifically for, how do I say this? We updated the EOC in response to COVID, putting in dividers, things like that. And that was approved at the state and the federal level. So we used funding where it was available that did not affect this. So now the EOC and the communication room is fully operational. And so, and we're fully staffed, so that the staff needs to get trained. We need to exercise that EOC, test out the equipment.
So what would happen if we cut that in half tonight?
Half of the activities would happen. So we have right now $7,300 worth of scheduled, that's what I just listed, that's what that costs right now.
Not 10,000?
Well, I mean, there are other things, but I left room to add other exercises and trainings. If a department comes up and says, we want something more specific, we want ICS position-specific training, I still have a buffer. But I'm saying that's what I have scheduled right now.
Mr. Post?
If I can interrupt, the money that she talked about to upgrade the facility and so on due to the COVID, that was a separate grant that she got, not part of the money that
Right.
that came through us.
I'm sorry, yep, that was separate money, just for EMA, like a one-time deal.
Mrs. Cesare, do you have?
No, I have no
Okay.
other questions.
I saw Mr. Pelletier?
Were we just talking about 7310 or something else?
We were talking about that as well
1010,
as,
7310 communications.
And 5376.
Can you explain that?
Oh, 7310, yeah, we'd like to purchase a dual band P25 compliant base radio. It's $6,000, we have a quote for it, so that we can communicate and keep up with those communities that are moving to the 800 megahertz, but also still communicate with those communities that are not. And this will be a base radio positioned in the EOC. And it's just one.
Mr. Rennie?
So, and that particular piece of equipment is something that cannot be purchased through the ARPA funds?
Probably not.
It's not directly related to COVID, so.
So all the money, the ARPA funds that we have, any expenditures on that have to be for anything that's directly affected or directed towards the COVID.
Yeah, or that you can make a real strong argument that it's going to the next round.
Mr. Kroll?
I think it's important to keep the delineation between the ARPA funds that you keep referring to that have the eligibility requirements, plus the lost revenue. Lost revenue has a much wider path to be able to apply expenses to. And so if we're going to ask questions, I think we need to make sure we're asking, is it the ARPA funds that are geared towards those for eligibility requirements, or are we referring to lost revenue, which can then be applied to, and the feds listed, and I think Mr. Post made it available for us, public safety expenditures, which means these would be public safety expenditures. But before we just jump on doing that, I think we have to really think about what do you want to apply or recommend for those funds to go to, and not just move everything that, maybe if we didn't have that, we may not necessarily be funding it. Like, I believe the $10,000 for exercise funds. You know, I'm not, we don't have a full plan on that. I'm not sure if this is the year to try to start a $10,000 exercise plan when we do struggle to probably get exercises off the ground with current funding that we do, only because of staffing challenges. Every municipality out there is faced with staffing challenges that they're not going to be able to send anyone to. I mean, I believe Lewiston PD is down close to 10 people. I don't know where they're at. Auburn Fire Department's down 7. No one's going to have personnel to be able to assign to a training exercise. So that, I don't know if this is the year to do the $10,000 is what I'm looking at. But I think back to the lost revenue, I think we have to be mindful of that, so that there are those dollars that could be used more generously. Thanks.
So I just want to add the trainings that I listed Some are requested and some are required. So the requested trainings were from public safety, and the others are required. So I just wanted to add that.
Can you give us some numbers on how much of the expenditure goes towards required and how much is that what you're going to ask, I assume?
So the ICS 3 and 400, that was actually both requested and required at a certain level, position specific. And I have here, that was total. And then we also had a quote here for ICS position specific training for type 4 incidents. And here listed for the position specific training was staging area manager, EOC manager, communication unit leader training, resource unit leader training, situation unit leader training, and this is for, this would be for our staff.
And those are required?
Yes, if you want to run a EOC, well, yes, I would like to train my staff up to that level.
Mr. Grohl?
So, just to make sure we're clear, so you're referring to if you want to be at that level, then it's required, but it's not necessarily mandatory. So you didn't have to make that available, and the EMA would be able to run currently.
Yes, it would be able to, yep, we could run.
And then ICS 300 and 400, those being offered in other locations as well? Because there was a zero line item here before.
Yep.
So those were being offered somewhere else, and they would go somewhere else for those trainings? Or online?
It's not online. You cannot take it online. Well, there's,
I think there is.
during COVID, I took a hybrid course. It was rough. But I don't see where that's been offered again, and it is limited. They are offered in other counties, but I've seen one recently. So it's not offered often. It used to be offered more frequently, but I would like to be able to offer it to the public safety that requested it.
Could you explain who would move into the ICS 300 or 400 level?
Who would
What
move into
personnel?
that?
What personnel would take that level?
It was a public safety department expressed interest and said if you're going to take that, I'd have a few staff
I'm
members.
sorry. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean like which department. I meant what position within a public safety office is taking that type of training, ICS 300 and
What
400?
position in that department?
Yeah, would be taking that. Who,
I refer to this reference sheet that's online at MEMA. I'm sorry, I don't have that
okay.
in my head right now.
Yep.
But I can get that to you.
Mr. Ward, you were starting?
Angela, you said you had the mandatory ones were amount less than 10,000, correct? Was that 7,300, is that the figure?
Scheduled,
Scheduled,
Allocated.
yeah.
okay. And your second point is anything that we cut from the expenditure side, we have to also cut half
From
of
my
that
revenue.
amount from the revenue side.
Yeah.
So you're going to get a quarter of whatever cut. Or half the cut.
Half,
Net half.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I get 50 cents for every dollar spent in reimbursement, and that goes back to the general fund. Or,
I'm good, I was just looking.
sorry.
One of the things that I would just mention as well, if you see, if you go back to 2020, the budget was $218,966, and she got cut drastically last year down to 205. And so a lot of this is simply trying to bring back, again, some semblance of reality, as a lot of places all over are trying to do.
Mr. Titus?
Hi, thank you. So I have a couple of questions. First of all, you said the base radio, because of the new 800 megahertz, you can't communicate now with the new LA 911 system.
Right. We actually don't have a radio currently capable of communicating.
Well, I guess my concern was, because I think I just heard that you can't use these funds, the COVID funds, unless it's directly related to COVID. So that-
ARPA funds.
ARPA funds, right.
Lost revenue funds are different.
Lost revenue funds are different, correct. But I'm looking in and I see a body scanner that we approved last year that all of a sudden came out of the general budget that we had approved, and now it's going to be okay to use these ARPA funds for. And I see the 24/7 help, which is something we've been wanting to do for years, and all of a sudden now it qualifies. But we can't qualify a needed radio, which she just mentioned what the good she's doing as it relates to COVID response. But because she can't communicate, why isn't that directly related to future COVID needs, to be able to communicate with the 911 system? If you can just position across for the medical contract and a body scanner, I don't see why you can't get some of this other stuff also in the same category.
Answer that?
We are constantly looking at what we can put over into that. You know, it's an ongoing process as the feds, they still haven't come up with their final rule. We're still under the interim final rule. And so as they continue to try to figure it all out, we try to figure out what they're figuring out. And, you know, so there may be some changes in the future as to exactly what and where we can go. But it all comes down to what they're saying and how we can interpret. And we try to interpret as well as possible that's going to keep us out of trouble. And Clarice is more concerned about keeping us out of trouble than I am, but
Well, I definitely do understand that, but you understand our concern is, you know, and the point was made tonight that $20 million is in our lap, but we're going to have a 12% increase in the tax levy, and yet we see things that are okay for the ARPA funds, but things that you're saying are not, which we really think could be the same. So we're going to be paying for that in the budget, and then we're going to get the ARPA funds to use for that, so that's like getting paid twice for the same thing, or use that for something else. I'd like to be able to come to some conclusion before we, you know, approve a budget and not spend money we don't have to spend. It's already available on the table.
We'll jump to Mr. Nichols.
Mr. Post, I'm glad Mr. Titus brought that up, the jail body scanner. Who made that decision to fund that out of, and how is it related to COVID? Like, straight face test, pass that to me. Because radios pass that, but how does a jail body scanner relate to COVID, but it was okay to spend that money?
when you look at the regulations for that, and I don't have it on the top of my head right at the moment, but there were 2 or 3 things that obviously when you go through that body scanner, one of the things is security in the jail. Obviously, that helps with the security, obviously, and it also picks up different bodily things.
The sheriff's here.
Yeah, he's going to tell you the short version.
Allows for no contact. It takes your temperature as you go in. It can evaluate medical things as it's screening you if there's irregularities.
Perfect, thank
you. And the company going through the process advised us, because it's a non-contact and it's got the temperature thing, it actually met the need. And I believe it was brought to the commissioners for consideration after it was looked at. And because it wasn't originally in the budget, it made sense to do that.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Mr. Carl, also, since taking the NIMS 402, selectmen and, I'm trying to think, staff from these municipalities that may need to open up their local EOC have requested additional training. And so that's, I'm sorry, I forgot that. That's why we included that as well. The position-specific training.
We're going to Mr. Kroll next.
Yeah, I think because we're going to have a long night, I'd make a motion. I'd recommend that we reduce the training exercise account 5376, reduce that by $8,000. Reduce the building repairs account, which is 4610, by $2,500 for a total reduction of $10,500, with a total reduction of revenue at $4,1250 respectively for $5,250, as well as moving $6,000 from the radio account to the lost revenue account out of ARPA.
So that would,
I'll second that motion.
Let me just make sure I got everything. So on line 5376, that's going to $2,000, so a reduction of $8,000. On line 4610, a reduction of $2,500, that's going to zero. And ostensibly in line 7310, a reduction of $6,000, taking that to zero, but asking the administrator to put that into ARPA funding. Is that correct?
Correct.
For a total of, taking out 16,500.
6K from ARPA revenue.
Lost revenue.
Lost revenue.
If I could ask for you not to do that, I've got a rabbit that I'd like to take
That you want to
in
pull out of
one,
your hat?
pardon?
When do you plan to pull that out of your hat?
It won't be during this particular, it'll be after this.
So leave the 6,000 is what you're asking?
I would ask that you do that.
Mr. Kroll?
I'm fine with that.
Let's do it for discussion and
We
hearing.
can still circle back, but
Okay. Mr. Post, do you have more to say about that line? About why you'd like us to keep it at 6,000?
It's one of those things where they're starting to build what they need to build, and it really, it's important to do that. And also, we don't want to be taking a little bit of the lost revenue funds from here, and a little bit from there, and a little bit from somewhere else, and make a total problem for Clarice in trying to do 832 different
Okay.
accounts.
Mr. Kroll and Mr. Titus, are you okay with just taking out the 10,500 and all will be revealed eventually? Or do you want to still take out the 16?
I'm fine with amending my motion. We can always circle back to it.
Okay. You're all right with that?
Well, I guess I'm just not convinced,
I'm not there yet either, but
not convinced
That's
that.
the circle back. He just said.
I'm going to
circle
write it
back.
on my hand. So we do go back to it. So I've got a motion and a tentative second.
All right, I'll second.
Thank you. To take out 10,500 from this expenditure and half of that from the associated revenue line when we get there.
9025.
Thank you, 9025. All right, any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hold on, quick math time.
Actually,
Seven. Okay, so that would be approving EMA 1010 at $216,500. Do you want to take revenues at the same time,
Well,
Mr.?
are we just voting on the
Please.
amendment on the bottom line right now?
What was your
The motion.
motion?
To take the revenue as well.
Okay, so we're doing the bottom line.
We're going to do it all at once.
Yeah.
Okay, before we do that, then I have a
Yeah.
couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Just wanted to know, on the salaries and wages line, did we add anybody? How many people do we have in that department?
Now we have 4.
There was an opening, there was a vacancy during part of the year, last year.
Okay, another question, just as, for my own curiosity, do they pay the money monthly? Do we get an annual check, quarterly? How do they pay
For
us?
reimbursement,
Yeah, the reimbursement.
quarterly.
So it's after you've expended it, you put a report in, and then you get that, half of that report shows of expenditures.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Right, did I hear someone to my left wanted? No. Okay, making things up here. Okay. So we're looking at total expenditure of $216,500. Total revenue would be $137,795. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous, 13-0 to accept those. Oh. Thank you, Ms. Molina.
Thank you.
Mr. Post, would you like to do your magic trick now, or should we put the sheriff through the
Let's-
ringer first?
Let's wait until after the sheriff does his magic.
Okay.
And he'll talk you out of my needing to pull the rabbit out of the hat.
All right, Sheriff Sampson. Tall order.
It'll be easy.
All right, so we're flipping to 1075, Sheriff's Department to start.
Basically, it's the same budget as before we last year, except for adjustments to wages, salaries, and a little slight adjustment because of vehicle prices. There's nothing new.
Mrs. Cesare.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the communications line, 7310, I was looking at the detail. Why is the final payment more than what we paid for the last, like, however many years for that line item?
We've been paying $44,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
so we were only gonna have like $6,000 left over.
And just
So
get rid of
instead of
it?
waiting next year to pay another $6,000, we decided just to throw it all in one
Okay,
account, just get it over with.
okay, thank you.
Further questions? Feelings? Mr. Titus,
Just out of curiosity, Sheriff Sampson, do you have any openings right now?
are you looking for a job?
Yeah, I'm looking, no, I just, no, I'm just asking, everybody seems to have staffing issues.
Yeah, I approached the commissioners several months ago about increasing the wages, as some of you that are elected officials in small towns have done with your contracts, because there's a huge concern in our wage gap is under. I showed them what our wages would be next year, as opposed to what everybody else was either currently paying or paying last year. So there's a concern. We have one opening currently. We have some needs, but due to the budget increase, we held off as far as staffing levels and plan to come back next year with the intent to move forward with that. The change in the agreement with the call sharing with the state police has affected us more than we anticipated. I guess you discount things like travel time, so we can be in Wales 1 minute, getting called to Minot the next. We added through a grant 2 positions for our night shifts. In the future, we're going to be requesting 2 positions to work days, but this year just wasn't the year for it. When we originally put the budget together to see where we were at, we saw the increase, we said we're going to have to tough it out. And hiring, as most of you know, especially in public safety, due to the events over the past couple of years, I think there's a lack of interest. Our last applicant pool, there was absolutely no new to the field applicants. It was all from other agencies. And that's odd. But I have a family member in college now who's changed her plans as well. So I think the past couple of years is going to be costly when it comes to public safety in the future, and now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions for the sheriff?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Ward?
Sheriff, how many staff are in the salary line?
1, 2, 3, 19, 20, about 23, 24. Oh, wait a minute, you're going to take out the Poland people because,
They got moved to the grant.
yeah, there's 4 Poland people. We have 8, 6, 14, plus 4, 18, 18 plus 3 in administration, and a civilian employee for administrative assistant.
Okay, and it's the same number as last year. You said that.
Same number. There's no change to this budget at all, with the exception of the adjustments for the wages and salaries, and, which is contractual, or what the commissioners decided for, I think they went with a 3% increase for general government. And then we made a slight adjustment because vehicle prices have gone up.
Is the 13,000 to make supervision 24/7 in this?
13,000. The corporals, the 13,000 was for corporal's position, so we could have 24-hour supervision. At night, we're doing a lot of, and on
That's in
weekends.
here?
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay.
We're doing a lot of, we always have, but it seems more so. I think call volumes might be up everywhere, or at least the levels of things. So we're doing a lot of backup for the smaller towns, if not, at this point, covering for smaller towns. And we're moving in the direction with the staffing levels we're at, that we have 24-hour supervision now, but when a supervisor's out, they're not replaced. This will allow us that 13,000 to always have supervisory, accountability standards come into play. So that's why it was requested.
Go on.
Yeah, my question is to either Mr. Post or Clarice, you've given us what the budget would have looked like before the ARPA funds were removed on the expenditure side and after. Of the $368,000, how much of it goes to this revenue line for those 4 Poland positions? The reason I ask is because I'm seeing a net 79,700 and having an issue trying to follow what it would have looked like before.
Where are you looking?
Still on revenue, 3120.
Oh, in here?
The sheriff just said that there's 4 positions from Poland. What's the payroll associated with that?
There's 5 positions in Poland.
5.
There's 4 patrolmen and an SRO.
Do we know the impact of that line with the budget?
Oh, because that's been moved to the grant line and we aren't seeing it here, is what you're saying.
Correct. I'm trying to dial in of the $368,000 in expenditures, which line item in the budget does it impact?
Alan, I'm with you, that confused me too, so.
So salaries would have been impacted by 295,000. And then there was some in telephone and clothing, uniforms.
Car clear, is there a car clearance?
About 300,000 is in expenses in the sheriff.
Okay.
And then the rest were benefits.
And there was, when you were asking about the car, Poland pays $52,000 a year for capital in the contract. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I'm just asking why, if it's 155 and the.
The two
ARPA
contracts
funds have been
combined is
removed, Why did
52.
one value with a car not get removed as well? You're feeling where I'm living. I'm seeing Mr. Crowell nodding over here.
Yes. So that's the same thing I was gonna, sometimes, I think I ask you this every year, is that, are we pulling every line item that is connected? And if so, if we're receiving 52,000, what did you say for the vehicle?
It's actually 50. I thought we were charging 12 in the SRO and 40 in the town, but we're charging 10 to the SRO, 40 to the town,
For the vehicle,
for the vehicle.
but the vehicle
vehicle
is
line item did
in
not-
this line item, not into the Poland contract with revenue.
Contract.
So did you pull out,
We didn't do this.
Now the question is to Ms. Proctor.
Automobile line in the 1075 is for vehicles only for patrol, CID.
So combined on the county side, we're purchasing 5 cars a year. On the Poland side, we're doing 1. And they're separated, I believe.
Where's the
Everything
budget?
Poland is Poland, everything county is
Where's the
county.
Poland car budget?
right,
Poland cars budgeted in the Poland budget.
In the grant contract.
In the special accounts.
Then he's asking why it was 150 for vehicles last year and 155 for vehicles this year? Is that your
It
question?
costs
Because
more.
in the past, Poland has paid for the actual vehicle.
So they paid it, so we didn't, it's not in our budget.
Right, what,
It's never been in
it
our
never, what
We're
happened.
good, we're good. If
You got
they're,
that?
if they're buying the vehicle, we're good. I'm
Yes.
just figuring the
That's
impact
what they
of this
did in the
one.
past, as a result of this 24-hour coverage, to make it easier for us, because they were on a different calendar year as far as fiscal and what we're doing here. So we were always going to budget committee meetings, it felt like. They incorporated the cost in the contract for us to handle it, and then they gave us their 2 new cars. Well, once we trade them in, they're going to sign them over. So it was like initial investment.
Okay, now that we're all talking about the same thing, further questions?
Do you
We're
want to
gonna-
open your can of worms?
Let's go to
yeah, I'm
Mr.
fine with that piece. The body armor is around 32,000, I think I saw in your budget line item. Is that for vests? So are you replacing everyone at once, or do you have a replacement schedule?
We're fortunate in a way that in the past people have stayed. So the last time we bought, it was pretty much everybody, and we based it on the expiration of those. The new people we've hired from other agencies, we tend to make deals buying their equipment. So it's budgeted for everybody to get a new vest.
So next year, you will not see $32,000 for, so they've hit their 5-year warranty, I guess I should
And
say.
we're at the end, so.
And are you receiving the 50% reduction in the grant, though, that's available for all law enforcement?
I guess I'm not aware of that.
We usually go out to bid because of the number, and we've been paying like $550 to $750, I think.
About $900.
About $900 with the extra carriers and all that stuff. So I don't know what ballpark you're getting, and I don't know how much of a reduction we are.
So carrier, everything, the grant covers 50%.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
We do grants regularly on radars and anything else we can, or through EMA, whatever's offered there, but we've only purchased vests since we've been doing this. It was like 5 years ago.
You can contact our grant writer, she'll give you all the information. It's available for every municipality. And I'm assuming county as well.
I know we looked at one year, for some reason I don't think we qualified, but I'll call the
Mr. Titus?
Thank you. The only thing that, again, from the beginning, I was a little concerned about taking this out of the budget, putting into a grant fund type account. And my only concern was because I'd like to be able to see all the expenditures that are charged that account in detail compared to the revenue, which is obviously the Poland paying for the services. If I heard right, the $368,000 is what we're charging Poland?
No, that's two different line items, Mr. Titus. Poland is 268, 226, RSU 16, which, that's their school, right?
Yes.
That was last year, right?
It's the school. I sit on that budget
Two
committee too.
different contracts.
But it's two different contracts, but we supply the people and the bills go through here?
They're billed for the actual person that works there unless somebody quits in the middle of the year, which is happening, but yeah. So, basically, here's everybody, here's their family medical, here's their main state, here's their FICA,
Yeah.
here's their uniform allowance, here's their vacation time, here's their cell phone, their mobile terminal, and they pay for it all.
Separate?
It's, the separation thing, you can talk to me until you're blue in the face about it. I was just told that was how it's being done.
Well, no, I understand that,
It's a
I mean,
common
yeah. But I just wanted to say we need to add, if it's 268, I mean, we get to add that to the budget. I mean, you have a reduction showing here, but I presume that every dollar that's being collected, we're expensing, so that would normally be in your budget, right?
The also, no, this is the first year we have 24-hour coverage in Poland. They just voted that in.
Okay,
So that's 2 additional positions. So I don't know what would have been in the budget, and I never,
Well, based on the numbers she just gave, what would have been in the budget with a 3% increase for COLAs would have been $1.819 million.
I'm not saying that budget was a 3% increase. I said the general government employees,
Okay,
they got a 3% increase. These people that could have hit steps, the cost of living, I think was 3% in the contract, but I'm not absolutely sure. So a combination of things can affect that.
yeah.
But as far as moving the Poland out, we were just told that's how it's being
Yeah,
done.
through no fault of the sheriff's department, it's just, that's a more
oh, no, like I
realistic
say, I'm not
number.
really saying it's your fault, although what I do want to point out is that you're showing a 3% reduction in budget, but really there's more like a 10% increase or more.
Well, no.
If you
it's-
added all that back in.
3% Decrease, Andy, we're showing a 3% decrease. No, I know what you're saying.
I'm saying, if you take all of your expenditures relating to the Poland contract and add them in to this request, we would see a significant increase
Well,
in
you
your
also got
budget.
to realize that 2 of those positions weren't there, so take those 2 out if you want to go at
Yeah.
oranges to oranges, then add it all up, and I'm sure there's an increase. As far as,
It's not
I
a
didn't
ton.
ever look at it, because I was told they were going to be separated from this point forward, and it's the system
Yeah.
that we work under, and I just play by the rules.
Is it possible for us to see that detail, Mr. Post? Or, you know, the account, how it works and what's in it, and, or this is a new year for it, so we're starting at 0, or we're,
Clarice just gave us the 10,000-foot view, and the fact that she's presented that 300,000 of it was salaries, and the 68,000 was roughly what she estimates the benefits.
and that's 368,000 for the Poland contract.
Total impact on the sheriff's budget, salaries and benefits. Other
Right.
items, incidentals were part of it. The majority of it was salaries.
Thank you.
Any further questions, discussions, any motions? Mrs. Cesare? Oh,
Go ahead.
Mr. Post is really excited. Let's hear it.
I was going to make a motion. Do you want to speak before I do that?
I'll let's just.
All
hear
right,
your motion.
let me pull my rabbit out of the hat.
Here it is.
Sheriff is
No,
close
you're not
enough.
gonna say nothing about my budget.
He's probably going to kick me.
Oh,
He already told me he's going to. As we look at the revenue loss money, and knowing that you was probably going to want to do some things. I figured that I would make it easier for you. And what we're looking at is line 3230, overtime, 125,000. Line 4205, gas and oil, 54,000. Line 4210, auto repairs, 32,000. For a total of $211,000, I would propose using from the ARPA revenue loss funds.
Yowza.
And I would say that's a bad idea, because what's gonna happen is when this AARP money is gone, this money's gonna get put back in the budget.
Right.
And most
It
of you
is.
won't be sitting here, and we're all gonna be explaining this huge increase. So it's a very short, and I know what Larry was trying to do. He warned me he was gonna do this. He said, don't bring it up unless they do. And you didn't, but yet he chose to.
Well, we were gonna get there
But
eventually, I think.
you know, you'll end up creating a bigger problem in future years. And I've seen the same thing happen with the budget committee for 16, 17 years ago when it came into how we purchase cars, and we've been trying to get out of that ever since. It was a 1-year savings and a 17-year waste of money and increase. So I would encourage you not to even consider that, because it's a regular cost. It'd be like saying, let's pay for some of your staff out of the ARP money because it qualifies. Well, next year when it ain't there, we're gonna add all those staff back in. So you're gonna be looking at, the increase of $200,000 for 3 employees or 4 employees. If you wanna use the ARP money for staff, I'd encourage you to add 2 additional staff so we can top off our patrol division now. That would be a wise decision. But as far as paying for existing things, I think we're going down a rabbit hole that will cause us a lot of problems in the future when it comes to budget time.
Mr. Post? You were trying to say something there?
I fully agree with him.
Okay.
And
And
yet,
yet, here we are.
and yet, reality takes hold of me, and how can we, one of the things we looked at was, okay, can we take the salaries and wages and take like 3 or 4 positions? And it's much harder to say we need to reinstate 4 positions or 3 positions, as opposed to, you're not going to have much of a choice but to pay gas and oil and auto repairs and overtime. That's a no-brainer to put back into the budget regardless of who's here. And so that's why, knowing that it was going to come down to where are we going to save that kind of money, that's where it kicked
How
in.
much it'll cost you in 2 years.
Yes.
So we're creating a cliff, acknowledging that. Mr. Post, do you have a plan for how much you would reintroduce to the operational budget next year? Would you put half in next year and half in the following year? Have you thought that far ahead in what you might propose?
Well, you would have to add essentially the same amount back into the budget next year.
Okay, so next year you would want to resolve this and put it back?
Yes.
Okay,
Have to.
we're going to move to Mr. Lunt.
I just want to comment that I think it's unfortunate the way that they structured this program, that it doesn't allow you to do direct offsets to revenues, and that's when it was sold to the public by Congress as a plan to offset the revenue losses in our local governments, and then now they're forcing us to either make it look like we have, less spending, so it's going to be a spending cliff next year, or just throw the money away and say, well, it's going to jack the taxes, even though we all paid for that money and it's not going to come back to us.
Thank you, Mr. Lunt.
Unfortunate.
Mr. Titus.
Thank you. Is it possible to fund that more than 1 year? I mean, we have $20 million we're talking about here.
Again, we come back to, there's, out of our total amount that we have, less than, about 5% of it is that revenue loss money.
Yeah,
And
so we could only do it. for 1
there are, like this building, we have so many upgrades that we could spend that money and still be significantly in the hole. So I don't want to spend all the money and then suddenly, you got to spend the money one way or another, and suddenly you need to do some more major upgrades to this building that isn't covered by the regular
Why would you want to
funds.
spend it on reoccurring costs that you know you're going to have? It's, no matter how you do it, it's bad math. It's
Mhm.
very, it's
It
not
is.
looking beyond the end of your nose. So I understand why he's bringing it up, but I don't understand why the concept is being discussed as problems in the future.
You all set, Mr. Titus?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Mr. Kroll?
So I appreciate what Mr. Post recommended, and I agree with the sheriff, and I think with Mr. Post as well, that it is going to create that cliff. I think to go back to what my original recommendation was, that's a one-time purchase on that communications, for EMA, and I would recommend that 6,000 that we mentioned there. And in the sheriff's budget, I would recommend that we reduce the budget by 32,000 for the body armor, because that comes up every 5 years. We can at least get a pass this year. That's nothing that he has to bring up in next year.
Can you remind us what line item that's in?
The sheriff might have to do that.
Under public safety,
7360.
Are you saying to use that money?
7360, reduce that by $32,000 to cover the one-time expense and build that back over time.
Do you think that qualifies? Just asking. I usually.
It does. Yeah, under lost revenue, that will definitely qualify under public safety. And then you had $6,600 for communications. What is that for?
What is that
That's
for?
under the 1075. We're still talking about patrol.
Well, if you were talking, that's to pay off a loan. Are you talking about the $6,000 we were talking about?
No, the $6,600 increase in your communications line
Yes,
item.
because as she asked,
Didn't get
we've been
that.
paying $44,000 a year for the purchase of our portables. We were gonna have like $6,000 left over next year, so we just added the $6,000 to just pay the whole thing off, so we'll be all paid in full.
And then next year we can look at terminals or something, because our mobile terminals are about to expire.
Otherwise, next year I'm gonna put in the budget for about $6,000.
So I would recommend that 6,600 also come under that, because then it's not coming back. It's paid for, is what you're saying,
It will be if you approve it.
after that approval. So I would recommend that 6,600 also come under the lost revenue.
Okay, Mr. Ward?
Following Mr. Farrell's logic.
Yeah, that-
Not the last payment on the communications line that you just talked about? So that item wouldn't come back either.
Well, he's
That's what I mean.
talking about future plans.
Yeah, we looked at doing that with our
Right.
cars, because years.
It's nothing you're purchasing now, is what you're saying. You're not purchasing that, that's something you purchased.
No, it was our,
Paying off
That's correct.
existing,
All
okay.
right.
So we're back
Yeah.
to the 32.
The car thing.
Yeah.
A whole mess of times, right, Clary?
Yes. So we're back to just looking at Mr. Kroll's suggestion of taking out 32,000 from line 7360.
I'll make that a motion.
Thanks. Anyone like?
Second.
Oh, wow, okay. Mr. Milks.
Is there a reason we didn't do the full 33.5?
And what I looked at, it was, I think the 33.5, the difference might be going to other items in that. And I thought I saw that the body armor was 32,000.
22. No, I'm sorry, I'm not reading that wrong.
You guys all set?
Nope, I'm asking, why aren't we doing the 33.5?
we're talking 7360.
Yes.
It was for a purchase of a crash data reader. There was also taser replacement and purchase of additional body worn cameras for 33.5.
So where is your vests replacement?
Oh, you were using the wrong figure. Where's the vest replacement?
I think we may have actually put the vest off another year, Mr. Kroll.
Well, we can buy them early if you want.
Well, I read it in your write-up, I'm trying to find it.
We're all reading.
You might have read it out of our capital plan?
I think it may have been in the capital
not in the
plan.
budget. Yep.
And then we
And they
ended up
took it out.
taking it out.
All right.
But I will certainly ask about the grant as well for the future.
We have 12 months now to research it.
I'm not seeing it, Mr. Kroll.
Yeah,
That was,
body armor.
it's page 10, but it's
Five-year
not there.
capital plan.
Yeah.
Ah. All right. Well,
30,
that was exciting while it lasted.
So that didn't go very well.
Still a valid,
But we do have a purchase of a crash data reader.
why are we not doing the 33.5? Right.
Right.
His motion is valid, I'm just trying to ask him the amount.
I would then make an amendment to that, that it would be the 33.5.
And Counselor Milks, do you agree with that?
Yes.
Great.
Yep, second.
All right, so now we're talking about 33.5 coming out of there and being used in the lost revenue space.
So can I ask, just
Yeah.
thinking ahead, this stays in our budget, but or are you taking it out?
It would come out of the expenditures with the direction to Mr. Post to apply it through the lost revenue funds.
I have one
Mr.
question.
Titus.
Yeah, just one question for the purpose of discussion. Can these funds be used as a revenue?
No.
No.
The
So they
final
can't-
rule is very clear about that part.
No, I mean, as far as on our list of, looks like we showed, don't we show the FEMA money, the federal money coming in as a revenue? For, not FEMA, the EMA?
Right, yes, that's a
That's
whole
revenue.
different, that's a whole different,
So we can't put that, they would think that we were calling that revenue when it's not revenue, even though it is revenue. Because I was going to say, I understand the idea of
We're playing a game.
putting back the overtime next year would scare you, because we'd probably say, what the heck are you doing?
Well, this is gonna scare me actually, because we
But-
try to have a capital plan that's consistent.
But why wouldn't we use funds that are available now? And even though it's going to be, next year, maybe they'll still be available, or the explanation is that, well, last year we were funded for that, this year we're not. Plus, once this COVID thing is passed over, maybe our revenues are going to start coming back. That's the whole hope of everything, and it won't be such an issue. We won't be looking at such a huge increase, because revenues will be better.
And I can appreciate,
Hear about the increases in the budget, and at the same time, I'm questioning, where is the patrol division losing revenue? Or is that a county overall thing that you can do that with?
so I would just go back to your earlier point that, you know, the 211,000 that Mr. Post proposed are recurring expenses. If we don't take them out of recurring, they have to come out of one time. And so I understand the building of the capital plan, but I think that's a smarter way to not build in a cliff quite the same way. What are other capital, so was public safety in capital? I didn't look back yet.
No, if it's the 33.5 and you guys got your heart set on doing something, then I'll say that's probably the least destructive, but there'll be consequences in our capital plan at some point, because, there's replacements all the time that are needed. So we've tried to level off the numbers so our budgets are fixed, rather than going up one year and down one year, and we've been pretty successful at doing it while improving capital purchases and the equipment that our employees use. So the 32.5, or whatever the figure is a lot less damaging than 200 and something, but the increase will come back. It's kind of like when we took over, there was a training budget of $5,000, which was ridiculous, and I think now it's up to 15, 11. There's been, so we've tried to do it in a way that was less impactful, but it'll bring us back, just not as back as far as 211.
Yeah. None of this is fun. But we press on with, our motion still sits on the
We're on
table.
33.5, right?
For the
That's-
33.5.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ward.
can we move the item if there's no other discussion?
Anyone else?
On the 33.5, right?
On the
Not bottom line.
33.5, not the whole lot yet.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 12-1. That direction to Mr. Post would be to move that into the lost revenues space.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Titus.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept Mr. Post's recommendation of reducing line number 3230 from 125 to 0. I believe he said line 4205 from 54,000 to 0. And I missed the last line.
It's the line right below that.
Oh, yeah, the 4210 for 32,000 to 0, with the idea that those funds would also be used the lost revenue funds.
I have a motion for Mr. Titus. Do I have a second?
Yeah,
For discussion purposes.
All right, Mr. Post.
4210 I've taken off the table.
You have?
Yes,
I didn't hear that.
because you just spent 33,000 and I only had 32 in there.
We didn't spend it, we just
And-
moved it.
Well,
We haven't spent
you moved it,
anything.
But
This is an
mercy.
interesting
Point
negotiation.
of order.
Yeah,
He took it off the table. His motion and the discussion actually stands.
yes. We're not,
Right.
trading here.
I really,
He doesn't want us to do it, Mr. Titus. Does that change your motion?
I'm going to urge,
Seem like it.
I'm going to
Well,
urge
in
that
the
you
interest of
don't
trying to
take
get
more than the
this-
211, because, again, we've got a significant amount of things that, needs to be spent and should be spent out of those dollars. And I don't want to bring us down to, like we did last year with the surplus fund balance, so that you're down to a hurting unit. And I'm concerned that it'll take us a long time to do what I've been trying to do for the last 6 years and haven't had as much success as I wanted to, although we're making some progress, but
Well,
please.
in the spirit of cooperation and negotiation, I would be willing to amend my motion to take out line number 4210 from the motion, that's 32,000, and only include line 42, excuse me, yeah, 4205 and,
3230.
yeah, 3230.
Okay.
Mr. Rennie?
Would you second?
I'll second it again, just strictly for discussion.
For discussion, let's hear it, Mr. Rennie.
Madam Chair, I have to agree, with the number of years I've been on this now, and the fights that have to take place to bring things back up to where they need to be, where they're gonna have to be next year. I just don't see where this is a good idea.
Penny wise, pound foolish.
Mr. Kroll.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Rennie. I don't think this is the motion that we need to move forward on, but I do believe that there are other one-time expenditures that are in this budget that we should be spending our time on going back to and start removing those to that account, because, again, sometimes it's the last person that comes before us, so that's where we start making some of these adjustments and making up some of these budget reductions, and I don't think we should do that. But I think we should look at the overall budget and ask Mr. Post, while we're having the next conversations with the other departments, to start coming up where are those one-time expenditures, because those should be the funds that we're going after at this point.
I would tend to agree with Mr. Kroll and Mr. Rennie. Any further discussion? Since this was just to discuss, you would have to make another motion if you would like to stick with this plan.
Well, yeah, I'd like to at least have it go to a vote. I mean, I understand what we're saying, but we've asked since we started these deliberations, what can be used, this money could be used for, and we're here on the third meeting, and we still don't know. I mean, we have to pick and choose. So we were kind of forced to do that. If there are other lines in here that make sense, somebody needs to do it, help us do that. Because I can't sit there and tell you what one-time expenses are when I'm looking at prior year and year after year expenditures. I don't see where we can find those one-time expenditures. But if we can, I'm willing to withdraw my motion, but I'd rather that we voted on this so that we can vote it down and then go to the next, whatever else we can offer in place of that.
I will take that as Mr. Titus renewing his motion to cut $179,000 from those two lines. Is there a second on that to go to vote? See.
I'll second.
Oh, wow.
I'll
Oh,
second
thank
the
you. I
vote.
didn't want two meetings in a row where I didn't get a second.
I don't think it's personal, but, and I think Mr. Ward would like to make a point with this vote, is my guess.
That's my
Yeah.
point.
All right, we'll go ahead and move this to a vote. All those in favor? It's a lonely vote. All right, all those opposed?
That's almost as bad as that. Not even
You
getting
really
that.
wanted to hammer that home. Keep those arms up, my friends.
Yeah, please.
All right, that was a 112. Thank you for your efforts there. We move along. Mr. Post, do you have any other items you would like to raise right now from, or Sheriff Sampson, any one-time expenditures in here that we should be aware of?
I personally don't, and of course, the other part of that is, if there are one-time expenditures, and we take, for example, I allowed those 3 lines, and if next year the one-time expenditures aren't there anymore, then you have that money available to put those 3 lines back. So as far as what particular line it comes out of, it doesn't make any difference.
The only one-time expenditures I'd offer is ones that aren't in here that we'd like to purchase, if you're interested in that.
I think I will not be taking that deal tonight. But thank you. All right, folks, any other questions on specific line items? All right, let's do some real quick math here then. All right, so with the reduction that did pass, we're now looking at a total budget of $1,953,185. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, no one else is doing math tonight. That's dangerous. All right, is there a motion to accept that number
I'll
as
make that
amended?
motion.
Mr. Rennie? Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Nichols?
We
Any,
want to include revenues at the same time. I am not making any recommendations on any changes in the revenue items that relate to this division, which are specifically 9370, which is RSU 16, it's already been removed by Mr. Post, it's at $0. 9375 security, $20,000. 9400 Poland security, the 268, 226 has been removed, so that's at $0. And insurance reports, 9300 is $3,500. I'd make the motion to include that.
Mr. Rennie?
I amend that my motion to do so.
Mr. Nichols? All set, okay. So we'll take the expenditures of, where are we, 1075 for 1,953,185, which is the amendments, and then revenue lines 9370, 9375, 9400, 9300 as presented. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, it is unanimous.
Nope, it wasn't.
Oh, shoot, sorry, all those opposed. Sorry, Mr. Timmons.
Okay.
I got real excited. All right. Well, that was interesting. Civil process, 1076.
There's 4 employees, no changes at all, except for the wages.
Sorry, where?
1076, civil process.
I don't know if you have any questions about it, I just.
Not seeing any quite yet. Think,
I was still doing math on the previous one. for all of
Great.
us.
The increase is due to wages. There was a stipend increase for the supervisor of the division, and that was union contract. And then, obviously, they all get cost of living, and probably some got steps, but I'm not sure of that either, so. I don't believe we made any other adjustments. There's no request for it. Everything was pretty much stayed the same. I think we increased their car payment this year, was that we waited till next. Same thing as last year.
When is that lease payment?
There was no lease.
Well, 7345, 0 to year to date. Is there purchases coming in the last quarter or something?
That money actually got, Reese can help me out, it's being applied in the near future.
Are you talking about the money that was this year's?
Yes.
Yeah, we're waiting to finish all, we're waiting for a vehicle. We're buying from ourselves as opposed to buying at used car lots.
Okay.
So the money, not all the cars are in yet, so we're kind of waiting to finalize the car accounts. The jail and civil budget less because the frequency of their cars being replaced is less. So every 3 years, the jail gets a new car, how it's working now. In civil, we give them a hand-me-down from CID or something like that, and they just ride it to the end. Where prior years, we'd go, like 1 year, went to Emerson, give me your best deal, and we ended up with
Chevy Equinox.
a Chevy Equinox. We've had Impalas, lease turn-ins and stuff like that, but we've had better luck keeping fleet cars that have 30, 40,000 miles on them and let them rack up the miles on them.
And then transferring it to a lesser division is what you're telling me?
Well, from civil, they actually get the boot when they're done with them. Like, they'll get two other, like 150,000 miles on them.
So currently, we just transferred one car over that's, it's got about 80,000 miles. So they'll drive it for the rest of the car life, and then we trade it in. So they just help purchase.
They do a
the
lot of
newer
driving
cars.
around the block, so we give them a car with mid-miles. Then the one we're giving them this year, I think has like 50,000 miles on it, maybe? Or the one we gave to Dawn? And then Tom, yeah, right around there. That's what we're doing.
Sheriff, can you clarify what I think I heard, that you said you're buying from yourselves instead of another?
Well,
What
it's
is-
just.
What is that?
Instead of going out and borrowing and buying a used car at a car lot someplace, when we buy new cars, they're going to patrol or whatever. When Civil needs a new car, like this year, we're getting a new patrol car, they're getting a new car, and we're stripping down the car and giving it to Civil.
So you're just transferring it within the division? Okay. I just didn't want to make sure that this was a $7,500 allocation that's a fee.
It goes to
that
the
actually goes to another
contribution
department.
and pretty much basing it out how long they
Yeah,
get out
no,
of the
we're
car.
good, we're good. It's just transferring to a lesser division to keep more life on the vehicle, to take the pressure off your frontline vehicle.
Right.
Right.
I wouldn't say lesser division, different division.
No,
but-
less mileage.
Less mileage,
Less
okay. I
mileage.
was like,
That was not what
that's
I
raising a red flag. Mr. Nichols?
Do you guys still have to deal with EMA, getting the vehicle after?
No, we don't do that.
No, EMA is, they used to have a rotation, but now they're keeping their vehicle, so.
Is there a motion if there are no more?
Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the $260,190 as requested.
I'll second it.
Awesome.
Can we add
Yeah.
7275 civil processing at 220,000 as is as well?
That's the revenue line,
That's
I
the revenue
assume?
line.
Okay.
Yes.
Mrs. Jezra, are you okay with that?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So we're going to take the expenditures and revenues as is. Any further questions?
Yeah, one quick question.
Go ahead.
When it comes to 2020 revenue being 103,000, are you going to be able to use the funding to replace that? I mean, obviously, you see 2020, the actual revenues was a lot less than what we expected.
Yeah, we usually budget, I think, 220, 225, and this year with the legislation, the Sheriff's Association pitched the increases that actually got supported, but somehow failed in the 11th hour. I don't know if the governor didn't sign it. It's gonna come back up to hopefully bring up revenues, but we lost revenues due to COVID.
Sure.
We're hoping it comes back up once we can start evicting people and divorces, and that may go up.
That'll get more going, that's correct. But actual losses, 2020 is behind us now, so that's an actual loss.
I don't know the rules to this stuff, so.
And no, you can't just take and replace a loss with other revenue. You have to use the lost revenue to purchase qualified items.
So why would that be any different? So that's where we got to find the capital expenditures in here and X those off the budget, but then I'm told we can't do that because if we do, the next year when you want that item, we're going to give you trouble because you're doubling your capital budget. So we're between a rock and a hard place. We can't cut anything, but we can't.
There's no capital in the civil, no capital.
No, I'm just talking about overall. I
Oh,
mean,
all right.
to get this money back, you got to use it for something that you may have purchased last year that you didn't because you lost the revenue, or something to that effect, is what I'm hearing. In order to recapture this 100,000, well, it's $115,000 that we lost in 2020, we have to, I guess I understand you got to
apply it to
replace.
operations.
Yeah, you got to apply it to something, which means it's a reduction or it's an increase in your fund balance. It ends up being an increase in your fund balance. Because if you
No,
budget for
you
it.
can't
and-
use it to increase your fund balance.
Well, no, but it ends up there by default, because if we put the budget in for
No, if
money here,
it's,
but you use the COVID funds for it.
there is
that's-
no default. What you don't spend on approved items goes back to the federal government at the end of the period. Of course, they can spend it better than we can anyway, but.
We can't really see where we're going to recover that lost revenue. It can be recovered, but only through a different way.
Through generating revenue through the civil process.
You're saying how we're going to recover that?
That's what I mean. How do we?
Right
just see
now,
what
the only way you're going to recover that is by reducing operating costs to help offset that lost revenue. That's the only thing you can. But you can't just apply it to lost revenue.
Yeah, so you have to reduce something in order to get that to happen, but we're not having any luck reducing.
But it doesn't have to be in that same budget that you lost the revenue in.
Right, it
could
doesn't
be
have
anywhere.
to be corresponded to civil process.
No, I understand.
like-
That's
okay.
it. I understand. There's other budget items we sold, we can't because of the cliff. You're afraid of next year, it's going to be a cliff that we, So we're really kind of
That's more of
between
an
rock.
argument for recurring costs than the one-time costs.
I'm not afraid of it, I'm just telling you the reality of it, especially when you're talking patrol budget. I mean, the jail budget fluctuates because it's so much larger and employees resign and we hire cheaper ones. But when you talk the patrol budget, it's so consistent that it would be over a cliff, and I'm sure whoever's sitting here next year, I'll be here, but, you know, whoever's over there isn't gonna like what they see if you were to do too much more than you already did.
Okay, I'm all set.
Maybe they'll be friendlier.
What's that?
Maybe they'll be friendlier. Who knows? Any further thoughts or questions on this budget?
Is that a dig?
I was just talking about myself, honestly. All right, so as presented, both expenditures and revenues for this, all those in favor? All right, it is unanimous. We'll move on to 1077, Sheriff's Department death benefit. I'll just remind folks that if we're going past 8, we're going to take a little break then. So I know it's a longer night than most, but just so you know that's coming.
Madam Chair, I'll make a recommendation that we accept this as presented.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Kroll, a second from Mr. Ward. Just for context, there was a conversation at the county commission level to raise this in order to make up for COLA increases that haven't happened in how long?
He died in 2006.
So,
Ever.
15 years.
There's never been an adjustment.
Correct. So, and that was, I believe, a unanimous decision coming from the county commission. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous. Great, chugging right along. Communications.
Again, the biggest change is there, is we took off a capital item, and we know it's gonna need to be replaced, so we budgeted, Marty's coming, we budgeted $20,000 to create a capital account, so that way we don't have to go to the commissioners in a couple of years and say we need to borrow $150,000 for this equipment out in the field, that has past its life expectancy. We're trying to get off the borrowing trend. So I believe the payment was probably $30,000 and we kept 20, was it? All right, we kept an amount for capital purchases to establish a capital account. I think it was $20,000.
Yes.
That's the only change.
Questions? Motions?
Mike,
Yes.
a question on the reserves. Forgive me for not maybe seeing it. Is there a list of all the reserve accounts? I know we have one for the building area to do a truck. They keep adding to that.
You have one in your
It's like the
folder.
6th tab in.
Okay.
We're also dealing with that
After revenue.
after revenues.
Okay, all right. Because my only concern is whenever we do these reserve accounts, is just to make sure that they stay in. I think I made the argument, or tried to the last time, to make sure that that money doesn't get used for anything else for any reason whatsoever, and there had to be some sort of, the way the commissioners do
The
that.
treasurer and the county administrator, because I think we're all on the same page with the savings that would be involved and better planning and probably lower budgets if we can start establishing. The goal was, for the past 7 years with me, just the cars, but we can't seem to keep up. So, once this is approved through the budget process, Clarice will establish an account designated for the capital purchases related to dispatch, which hopefully will save us money down the road when the stuff starts to fail and we'll have.
Yeah, and I agree with the process, but my concern has been in the past, if you're not careful how we do it, the money could be used for a short budget season, or a short budget
That-
year,
That
for
that would have
something else.
been before my time, and so, since my time, that,
And I would say since
We
Clarice
haven't-
came on, she's pretty good with making sure, we call it protecting our money, because in effect, we've been the brunt of money in an account that goes someplace else over some technicality, but Clarice and Larry together,
Okay.
they put it where it goes.
No, I understand that, but I was saying that wasn't there some sort of a legislative, or the way we could actually set up these reserve accounts to make sure that our county commissioners, whoever they might be 5 years from now, couldn't decide to raid all these various accounts to balance the budget. to keep that from happening in the future, not now, not next
I
year,
don't
but.
know if you can, but the money will be there, and they might do like what you guys did tonight, say, well, you got this money, let's offset the costs, and then we gotta start all over, that can happen, I don't think there's an assurance. Other than, they can't do it unless it goes through the budget process, and then you got a budget committee, you got department heads that hopefully take a stand, but when I started done with the vehicles years ago, the sheriff at that time thought, well, I'm getting what I want today, so I'm not gonna argue, but it
Yeah.
ended up costing everybody down the road. So I agree with you, I don't think you can protect it like that, though.
That's my only concern about reserve accounts. I love the idea, but the problem is that 3 years from now, you could have 60,000 in there, and they say, well, you know, we need it for something else, and it goes away, because,
Agreed. But it has to go through the process.
Mr. Nichols, was your hand up earlier?
Yes, sorry. I just had a question on the telephone account. How come that went up so much this year?
Telephone account went up $195 a month. We added a huge simulcast radio network last year. The radio path from Belfield to the Durham Fire Station, where one of our repeater sites is located, was not a feasible link. So we had to put a dedicated fiber optic line in.
So is this annually going to be something average 6,500 a year as opposed to
$95
3,000?
a month, every month.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Kroll?
Under professional fees, it looks like we haven't spent more than 2,000 in the last 2 years out of that account, but 10,000's budgeted. What does that account for? And
Professional fees,
professional fees?
line item number.
Well, let me make sure I'm in the right one.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong account.
Yeah. We have $10,000 somewhere we're not spending. We'll be back.
I didn't put my glasses, clearly I didn't have my glasses on. I was under commissioner, it's my fault.
Mr. Ward?
Madam Chair, I'd make a recommendation or a motion. I would like to cut 7,300 capital reserve account to zero. It's an equity issue for the building one that we did the previous night.
All right, I have a motion.
I get the intent, but on 12% increase this year, I'm not willing to buy it.
Motion for Mr. Ward, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rennie.
Can you repeat the motion, Madam Chair?
Yes.
7,300
73.
department capital reserve, cut by 20,000 to zero.
Sheriff Sampson?
I'll be nice, because I know it's Alan's last time with us.
Going away present?
You're agreeing with this?
Most
Okay.
people like my going away side, too.
You can only ask for so much, and I understand your purpose, and I'm glad you guys at least recognize what we're trying to do. So it'll be back, but in looking at what you're doing and some of the other considerations you made, I get it, maybe not so much time creative savings account.
All right. Any further discussions on that motion, which is just that line item to start with?
Correct.
All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is passed 12-1. All right, so that moves our total down to 839,400. Further discussion, motions, questions?
Make a motion, Madam Chair, that we approve the request of the amended request of 839,400.
Right, the motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Nichols? All right. So that would be the budget as amended. Any further questions?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Ward.
I'm following Mr. Crowell's logic. Account number 7310. Yep. Is the $77,000 item a new item, one-time current expense this year?
So we have aging components, and through attrition, I've been trying to replace the ones before they fail on us. So I was actually discussing that earlier. I think following the Kroll's logic, that could meet that straight face.
The other one is clearly debt service, because it's.
Are you, yeah.
The other one is clearly, because you said year 3.
Right,
So that-
you're talking the
You're talking about the
$7,000 is part of it?
7,000, just the 7,000.
Not the
The 70,000 is, I think, our second or third year
And we
payment.
can't do debt, Clarice is all over that, right?
I don't follow your logic, but if it passes a straight face test, I guess.
It's a one-time expense that he's gonna have another one next year, he's already said it.
And that would go into the lost revenues.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Rennie, would you agree with amending?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Amend my motion.
Mr. Nichols is on board too. So that's going to be taking out 7,000 from line 7310, which would bring up.
7,550.
No, 7,000.
No, just 7,000.
Right here.
Which is bringing our new total to 832,400. My friends have agreed to, so that's great. All right, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor as amended? All those opposed? Motion passes 12-1. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
And now we're on to the jail supportive prisoners, which is going to be 1050.
This one, you guys should be happy with that proposed, because I believe it's like the lowest increase out of all the county budgets for some reason.
You say that.
And quite frankly, for those of you that are new, this one, there's so much state involvement in this budget and how we have to,
Originally, we had in there to replace the radio system in the jail at a cost of about $75,000, but when we saw this number coming in late, we took it out figuring our budget would be too high. So now we regret not putting that in, but as you see, it's a low increase. There's 55 employees that work out of it. There's things in there for the capital plan. I believe this year we were going with a washer and dryer. Driveway. And paving the driveway because there's some sort of handicap compliance issues. And it's been recommended we do it for years, but other than that, it's the normal money, like with every budget, capital item. Last year, we did, I think, refrigeration stuff in the kitchen. This year, it's the laundry and the paving of the driveway.
Mr. Kroll?
So Sheriff, to go back to your original position with shifting capital out of a budget. So it looks like in this budget, you shifted $220,000 of capital expenditures into operating, reducing your capital to nearly zero with, and I understand that the total comes at only $54,000 increase, but there is a $220,000 shift from capital expenditures to the operational line items.
I think it would have been because last year, the budget committee budgeted $160,000 for the body scanner, and then later on, we got the federal money and found out that the body scanner qualified, that would be a reduction.
Right, so there's the 150,000 there, and there's the 70,000 that's under building improvement, I'm assuming,
That's pretty consistent.
yeah. So I guess I'm looking at, this jail budget didn't really it's just a standard budget. It's $220,000 of shift of capital or building improvements into those other line items.
Oh, when I say, I'm sorry, I guess, basically, there's been no major changes to this budget. There's no staffing, there's no, just the normal maintenance of things. You're saying that the capital budget is higher than normal?
You say you should have.
No, I'm just saying you covered it through ARPA.
Oh, the body scan, yeah.
Nothing more than that, Sheriff.
I'm sorry for that.
It's less about you, it's the listening dot that's taping behind you.
My concern is that this is a considerable increase in the budget. It's just shifting capital expenditures to pay for them. Because you're looking at transportation office increase 70,000. You have all your benefits that are increasing. Workers' comp had a considerable increase of 28,000. Pension and retirement had an increase of 30,000. So there's a lot of big jumps in this budget that if you look at the previous year, you didn't have that many, the budget didn't increase to those volumes, other than now we have a shift of capital and it's covering those operating expenses. That's my concern.
Yeah, so what you're saying, I guess, is the operating costs went up, but our capital improvement plan went down?
Yeah, that's what's
Because the overall budget
listed.
increase was less than 1%. So we did as best we could. If you want us,
What I'm saying is those operating costs are gonna be there next year, right? And then you're gonna have a capital expenditure that's gonna come in. What we just did was we increased $220,000 into that operating this year. And then all we're doing, like you had said in your original argument, all you're doing is pushing that off. That's my concern here. Rather than us, if that hadn't happened, then we could have easily moved those capital over to a one-time lost revenue account and then just looked at your regular increases within your operating. But it basically kind of shifted all of those dollars into operating.
And when you look at the four budgets that are under the sheriff's office, we try to balance it out. Everybody has needs. I think when you look in capital, other than what we call routine maintenance type stuff, last year, we hit up the heating system, although it still isn't done, but it was budgeted last year. You know, we have a future plan where we're gonna have to make a $500,000 purchase about on the control board. We have concerns with the elevator because it's 30 years old, operating 24 hours a day. That might need some work with the pistons and the mechanics in it. It'll probably be payments, but a lot of times when we're building the budget, we try to figure out the impact and lessen it, so when we get here, it's easier. But we also try to address our needs. So we do move money around. It's just the capital issues in the jail are a lot different than the capital issues in control and communications. Those are predictable. The jail, it's a heating system for $150,000. Is that what it cost us?
Yes.
And then, you know, the body scanner, that was advantageous, especially dealing with COVID. But there's other things in the jail that are failing that we knew this year wasn't the year to ask to finance a control board. So you're right, it's gonna go back up. It's just, you ask for $500,000 to do it, or do you finance it for 5 years? Those are the type of things that we'll have to evaluate once we get there. But everything came in really late this year as far as the numbers. So it made it difficult for us, because we were 100% staffed when we did it, figuring that's gonna go up huge. So we eliminated the proposal for fixing the radio system in the jail. We didn't even consider the control board issue, because we knew it wasn't the time. And I don't think we actually had the actual numbers till August.
Yeah, it was middle of August before we got the state's numbers of what they were going to give to us.
And then you kind of looked at it and said, wow, I wish I would have addressed the radio issue or something like that, but it's gone by, we're not asking for it. But you're right, that could happen. But in it, doing every budget, that's what we try to do, make it consistent and then try to absorb the financial impact of it as best we can.
Further questions on, where are we? Jail, sorry. Got a little lost for a
Are
second.
we
there.
going to talk about revenues at the same time, or?
Yes, please,
Sure.
go for it, Mr. Titus.
Because I just wanted to get an overview of what's going on with the jail revenues from, the state. Obviously, that's what that is. There's a reduction. Is that it's
Some of
proposed?
our reductions are down, not the big ones, but some of them are down because we haven't been able to have alternative sentencing programs as consistently as we did due to COVID, which is basically instead of people going to jail, they go, we have them stay at a school for a week, or Auburn Parks and Rec has hosted it several times. We go throughout the county at different locations to provide free labor, and participants go. So that's one line that's gone way down because we just haven't been able to have those programs. And I'm sure you're talking bigger tickets, but pennies add up.
Yeah.
Larry? Some of us.
Go ahead.
Looking at the revenues specifically, because it was brought up, can we just go through what's in the 2,229,114? I'd like to go line by line, just to be able to get an idea of what the 12% is, to give it life to what the sheriff's just presented to us.
Okay, in support of prisoners, last year we got $1,335,276 from the state and $168,120 for the community corrections assessment. This year, what they did, they took the community corrections assessment and added it into the jail reimbursement formula. So we got more money for the jail reimbursement and then $168,000 less for the CCA money. Again, the alternative sentencing program, Social Security amount of medical that comes back to the county from medical services, court surcharge, and from the inmate benefit, those budgets we've all, even though the total budgets or the total actual revenue was drastically down, both last year and this. but that's going to come back. We're pretty confident. And then last year, if you remember, we used $550,000 from a reserve that we had been able to build over the last couple of years due to a couple of things happening at the state level and how we were able to manage our dollars. And so out of that 550, there was 150 we didn't spend, and so we used 400. We had 775, minus 400 is 375, and I'm proposing to use 100,000 this year for next year, so that'll be 175, and that's bringing us way closer than I want to be, because that jail funding and the way that everything works, and you're just one crisis away from being a hurting unit. And so I really would, and we didn't used to have a reserve account in the jail. We were able to do that, fortunately, at the same time that the state changed their funding formula. We used to be able to, there were 7, I believe, of us counties that had what we called supplemental funds, which meant that at the end of the year, you figured you were going to be short by X amount of dollars. Our amount of dollars was about 360-something, 66,000. And I would always put that in the budget, knowing, we'd do the budget of your expenditures, figure out what you needed for revenues, and we always calculated 3% increase in our county tax going forward. And so we would end up with that lost amount of revenue that didn't show up, that was you expected from the state as part of the supplemental funds. We used to get that at the beginning of the fiscal year. Last year, the state changed the way they operate, and so now we were 366,000 that we had anticipated didn't come. And they changed the whole thing so that now you have to beg, plead, and borrow at the end of the year if indeed you were over budget and needed those funds. And actually, that was last year. This year, they took the whole amount, did not leave any supplemental funds whatsoever, and put that, and that's part of the $2,808,141 that we have.
And part
So-
of it, there was, the change would have been, there was legislation this year that was gonna actually, this is what's gonna happen with jail funding. And the good part, well, the good part was it was almost like they do per pupil cost, as sad as that sounds. But there was a safeguard in it where they won't give you less funding than you got the year prior. So like COVID, our head count went from 170 to 70-something at some points. But there wouldn't have been a financial consequence for it because our operating costs stay the same other than we're spending less on food and probably water and sewer. We wouldn't have been penalized by the new state formula. But that was another thing that went forward, supported, voted on committee, but still out there. So it'll come back the next session. And at least then, you'll be able to forecast what you're getting for money, or worst case scenario. So if your head count rises, you'll get more money. They have a term for it that I don't remember right now, but, and it'll provide the safeguard is if you get your head count down, which we try to do through alternative sentencing programs, you won't be penalized financially either. Because you don't want to create an environment where you're better off being overcrowded to make money. That's kind of not how you want jails to run. At least not all in our jail.
Mr. Ward?
Mr. Post, in the first meeting night, you mentioned what the balance in the supportive prisoners reserve account is. Can you repeat that?
I want to say the amount in the jail without looking is 376,000. We started out with 76. We used 400 for the budget, taking out the 150 that went for the body scanner. So that leaves 376. And then I'm proposing 100,000 for next year. That brings it down to 276.
The evolution of that reserve was built up over how period, long a time?
It actually worked out that it was only a couple of years,
So we've been operating without a reserve in the jail.
without a big, yeah, we had some, but not,
In the beginning, when BOC went away, if you had money left over, they took it. And we were able to discover in advance and address capital issues that we had, specifically to the jail. Like the programs vehicle that we replaced. We had an excursion that the frame was falling apart. So we had, I think it was 160,000 left over in year one. We addressed things in the jail, I think radios, carpeting, the vehicle, new garage doors for the Sally Port. Otherwise, you have to give it back. Then they changed the rules a little bit, so they held on to it for a time of need.
Madam Chair?
Keep going.
Yep. Unpopular as it is, and I'll give you the rationale for it, I'm going to make the motion to take an additional 200,000, making it 300,000 from other reserve under the support of jail, specifically that it has been a short term that we've had a surplus in the support of prisoners. Specifically, the 6 years that I've been on this board, it's been nobody wants to cut associated with that. We don't touch either the revenue side or the expenditure side. So I'm going to say a motion to pass the expenditures as is, but if we have a surplus, there's no sense raising additional. It's the least cost to this budget.
So that's a motion to add
200,000?
200,000 to other reserve, taking from the Support of Prisoners Reserve account.
Correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we've got a Lisbon duo, Ward Lunt. Administration, would you like to comment on that any further?
that would bring the, that would bring the jail budget
176 to your reserve account, correct.
down below what it was last year. I am concerned about state funding going forward. If,
So part of the glitch with state funding was if you didn't spend what they allowed, 3%, they would give you
and
hardship about their funding.
And this year, we're not spending the 3%, we're only spending, didn't increase the budget by the 3% on our taxpayers. And, I looked at that and thought long and hard, but yet was trying to balance everything out. But I'm afraid if we go below actually last year, we're asking for trouble.
And at the same time, the 376,000 that Larry believes in there, we were just talking, it might be wise to look to adding to it, so that way next year we might be able to use that for our control board. Or if in the event it fails this year, we have the ability to maybe address the control board issues. So that way our capital budget doesn't go back.
And to the point that Mr. Prowse made throughout the course of the night, it's a one-time expenditure that we could cover from the lost revenues anyways, and you get it whether.
I kind of rubbed some people the wrong way last year when I didn't bring something to their attention, but it got brought up at the budget committee.
Right.
So I'm not doing that. I'm just saying if the money's there, and I know what you're saying about this AAR money or whatever it's called, maybe that could be used for. I don't know. I know the jail has needs. We try to take a measured approach, I guess. And last year you all saw how it came up. There was nothing, there was demand on what are you doing? And I said, well, we could do this, and the money was offered. And it's proven very valuable, actually. The control board, we're just worried it's not gonna make it, much longer. It could be a year, it could be 2, it could be 3. Leaving this money in even a reserve account would make it available for us next year to use. And I don't know if you're aware, the jail budget starts July 1st. So then we're already 3 months into it. So if all of a sudden next spring we have a problem with the control board, we can put it in a budget that starts July and effectively, I guess, use it to address the issue. But it's just throwing ideas out there.
Mr. Kroll, you had your hand up, right?
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, no, I did.
Okay.
Real quick question. Officer training reimbursement, that seems new for 15,000. What is that?
That's a new line we put in. We're purchasing corrections officers, similar like they do with police officers. You have to pay for their academy stipend.
Is that a new statute requirement?
Correct. We were taking that out of other places, it's now being built a line for that, so that we can show what we're paying for these folks.
We bought some from Cumberland and some from Kennebec
lot.
this year. A lot from Cumberland. But we actually sold some back too, so it's helpful to have it because the treasurer is very uptight about using appropriate lines for things, so we created a line for it, because she didn't like our reasoning of, well, it would cost us overtime if we didn't buy these people, so let's just take it out of the overtime line. She made us do this.
Yeah, I think it's okay to have a negative in that line item when you know you're gonna have it offset in your salaries because you've had a vacancy, which means you're not funding that. I think that covers it, rather than necessarily having that line item, so. Well, I think that's what finance directors would like to do, but I think that at the end of the day, to budget for something that you may or may not use next year, depending on if you're hiring it.
The treasurer doesn't like negative balances in lines either.
Yeah. Well, that's just, at the end of the day, as long as the bottom is done, I think that's where we would be at, so I'll be recommending something on that. But then under boarding, it was 100,000, now it's 30,000, there's no expenditures to that at all.
Well, the issue with COVID, at one point in time, like, I have a building committee, although we're kind of on hold because we're waiting for Harriman Associates about the public safety part. But prior to COVID, we were at the point where we needed to look alternatives to the facility. And we were boarding out 30 inmates a month, and then we were for as much as 4 months out of the year. And it was, July through September, October. And it was happening consistently, like 3 years, it was growing a month, 2 months every time. And COVID happened, and that lowered our head count. So we hadn't spent any money, but when it looked like COVID was under control, I guess you'd say, our head count is back up. We're in the 140s regularly. Our capacity is 160. We thought it would be totally irresponsible not to have some ability to pay a boarding fee. In the event, our head count goes back up to 190, 210, like it had been doing.
Now, Chair, I think I was asking questions outside of the motion, so my
That's okay.
apologies. So, yeah.
Yeah, we do have a motion on the table to take away some precious or reserve account and put 200,000 into other reserve. Any further discussions on that motion? This is within the revenues line. All right, all those in favor? Okay, we got to count. All right, all those opposed? Motion passes 11-2. All right, Mr. Kroll, did you have other motions to make?
I'd make a motion to remove the 15,000 for the officer reimbursement,
Can you
knowing
give us
that'll
a-
just come
a
out of
number?
salary. 15,000, I'm sorry.
3123.
Thank you.
123, thank you. I've got a motion from Mr. Kroll. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Titus.
In all likelihood, we've probably already spent that this year.
Checks in the mail.
I mean, we bought one guy for $8,000, I believe.
Another guy's, the bill's coming, so if Mr. Kroll said he's okay with going in the negative, it will be in the negative.
As long as you tell Clarice it's okay to go in the negative.
Well, prior to the creation of these accounts, we need to go before Clarice.
Where was
Prior
it
to- prior-
allocated before?
Where was it paid out in prior years? This is the first year you budgeted it there.
Right, it came out of, I believe,
The-
salary.
We would alternate, she wouldn't let us take it out of training, even though we argued that we can't send people to training, so let's use the training money. We took it out of salaries and wages and overtime, and somebody told me in the hallway one day that we really shouldn't be doing that, so we created a line to solve the problem. But if there's gonna be nothing in the line, does it exist?
Not the time for philosophy, but
The tree falls in the woods.
that's what it feels like.
I would just say, I think this is, I understand the reasoning behind it. This is where the creep takes place within budgets, because that would normally be absorbed in a salary line item where there was a vacancy and we were not paying for those individuals. If we're paying somebody a cost like this, it's because they have a vacancy and they're backfilling that vacancy. And that means that they've lost, they have not had to pay out salaries. Very rarely are they bringing in somebody the same week that somebody's going out the door.
Yeah,
So-
it's cheaper because you're saving the overtime costs, you're saving the cost it would be to hire somebody brand new, send them to training, pay for the training, replace them while they're at training.
I completely support taking somebody on a lateral, but I just don't think we need to create a line item for it.
All right.
Or, I'm sorry, if the treasurer would like, remove 15,000 out of salary and put it in that line item, I'm fine with that too.
I'd rather leave the salaries alone because those are actually real people that, for some reason, the jail budget, it's all, well, not some reason, everything in the salaries line is accounting for the people that are in it right now. So I'd go with the original if you're gonna do it.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to take, to zero out line 3123. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 11-2.
One further motion, Madam Chair. Make a motion that we move $30,000 from the building improvement account to the lost revenue,
Can you give us a number for that line?
7205.
7205. And can you just say that motion? Oh, you want to take 70,000 out?
Take 30,000 out of the building improvement to the lost revenue of ARPA fund.
All right, I have a motion from Mr. Kroll,
Second.
second from Mr. Rennie.
70,000, the whole thing, that must mean everything that's in there.
Any further discussion?
The 30.
Okay, yeah. So it would leave 40. Yes, okay. A lot of numbers rolling around here. All right, further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Makes sense.
All those opposed? Motion passes 12-1. All right, quick math time.
$7,621,094.
So are you done with our budgets and the rest is just the rest of your agenda?
Well, we haven't voted through your whole budget yet, But-
I gotta circle back to communications.
so no.
What?
I gotta circle back to communications, so no.
Circle back to it?
Yeah, we're taking a trip back there after, allegedly.
No alleged. I'm doing
See
it.
if you get a second on your motion. Okay, so now we've got a full total budget at $7,621,094, and revenues would then be $2,429,114. Do I have a motion on those, or any further line edits?
I'd make that motion.
I'll second it.
Ward, Rennie. Any further discussion on either expenditures or revenues for jail supportive prisoners? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous. We will go ahead and take a 10-minute break since it's 8:13. We'll be back at 8:23, and we might be heading back to communications.
I just forgot to talk about revenues.
Oh.
That's-
Well, that's got nothing to do with me.
But it's his budget. The excitement,
All right, we're gonna bring it back together. Do we have everyone? Looks like most folks. Great. Awesome, okay. So, do you have a motion to reconsider?
No reconsider. We did not talk about 9345 dispatch revenue.
Great, so let's head there real quick.
I am looking at that, and I've looked at it several different ways, and clearly, in my opinion, that account is tracking to be in excess of the 284,601 that's budgeted for this coming year. And what I would offer is that 2020, that account actually came in at 335,000. My estimate is that that revenue is going to come in at somewhere around 315,000 to 335,000, depending.
The 2020, the 335, that was because somebody hadn't paid the year before, and so it didn't get put in until the following year because they paid two payments.
Do we have any anomalies like that this year, Clarice? So if I was to take the actual amount that's, and I'm for the listening public here, if you go to the revenues Mr. Post has given us in the last document that's in that section, actual,
So it was projected at 271,000, and what's the actual? 208?
fingers aren't working, I'm sorry. Currently, right now, we're at 208. The assumption that I am making on that is that that's 8 months' worth of activity. You add an additional 4 months on that, that's where I come up with my $315,000 estimate.
Mr. Post?
Well, I think without knowing and without having that in front of me, some, I think, pay ahead. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that's the case where some don't pay it every month, they pay it.
But they pay 12 months in any given year, right? So they're not paying for 15 months in any given year.
No, but you can't take the year-to-date and say, okay, you add the 4 months because they've paid 8 months, because some of them would have paid 12 already.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
pay 12 months at a time. Yes. So some of them have already paid for the whole year.
Okay, so the 208 is not a direct line.
So this amount is actually what the contracts say that they need to pay.
So 284,601 is what you're telling me that you anticipate everything for all contracts as of right now?
That's what we plan to invoice for.
Okay, so my question, and I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Kroll because we have unfinished business from last year, 2 years in a row, talking about what's actually in the value of those contracts, and I'd like to have him take the floor.
Yeah, I think I would just go back to what we've been speaking about. I think that when you do contracts, you're including an administrative fee in those contracts to ensure you're covering all the costs that are associated. Because we are charging other towns a fee for dispatch services, it should be that true account, that should be the true amount. So at some point, we need to get administrative costs into this line item, even if the sheriff says that of his administrative department, 5% of their time is spent on communications. That needs to be in this line item, so we're seeing true cost to communications.
Sure.
That's what we keep asking for. I think, I'm going to strongly encourage that that happens again, because then that helps determine those fees. Those fees we know were just pulled out of the sky when they were set. They've been slowly increasing at very small percentages, but as you can see, and I don't know, has the commissioner set the fees yet for the?
They will set them next year to start the following. They're 3 year, they've set them for 3 years, and so this is 2022 is the last year, and 2023, they need to set fees again.
So I would strongly suggest that we add those admin fees in and then look at true costs to demonstrate the true increases. So when they're setting those fee increases, it can be based on those percentages.
Right, sure.
So, point of clarification on that then. When you're saying you're setting it for 2022, we talking our calendar, or are we talking the fiscal that all of us work on?
The person that can answer that left us, but I think it is our
Oh,
calendar.
he's right there.
Oh.
It's calendar year, yes.
So potentially there could be in
I-
that
I
6
think
months
there's-
that actually would be covered underneath this budget for any municipality sitting in the room that's actually using that service.
I think there's only 2 that the contract goes July to June. And those are the smaller towns.
And the reason I'm mentioning that is we've been back and we've accepted the removal of everything for Poland, but that's the same logic. In that regard is, when we're talking, I'd like to know all in, everything that we're providing for that same reason for when you're setting that contract in the future. And I'm not picking on any one community, but if there's specific services and it's, we clearly heard it last year here that we, 4 times the IT budget coming out of this county. If there are costs that are in that, as a specific example, that aren't picked up in these communication budgets, we're not getting a true accounting. I will live there. In that regard, it just doesn't make sense that, because I heard, if I remember correctly, somewhere between a 2 and a 3% done on annual, when none of these divisions are actually under that 2 or 3%, the assumption is already flawed.
So we are looking at revenue, 9345, dispatch services. Doesn't seem like we can move a lot on this year, and the proposed amount is 284,601.
As I brought this forward, I would make the recommendation as is. I will accept these contracts, but it's the last year, being the third, that I've heard that same thing, that we need to address where that revenue item lives next year.
I have a motion for Mr. Ward to accept as is.
I'll second that.
And a second for Mr. Rennie. I would echo the sentiment that as we go into the negotiation, exploding out those costs and truly understanding what this county is bearing for communities would be helpful. Any further discussion? Mr. Pelletier?
Larry, you said that amount is set every 3 years?
Yes. Yeah,
Why can't it be addressed every year?
They said it's not the same amount for the 3-year period. It's a graduated scale that they have done.
Is that a standard 3%?
For example,
or-
this year, if you look, it's an increase of 5%. I forget what it was last, but I think it was the same. I think it's been 5% for a
Sure,
couple of years.
has a comment?
Well, not about the percentages, but when I took over, we made an emphasis to get, we had a dispatch center here that was already operating, but it wasn't operating to capacity. So we went around to the small towns to get them back on, explaining that it will offset your tax base, we won't have to add additional, so you'll save yourself money by coming with us instead of staying wherever you are. Most weren't happy with their service, but there was also this lawsuit that they had against the county, so it was really tough to navigate. So we took them on at a rate, but there was this lack of trust with county government back in 2015. I had suggested to the commissioners, it would help me out if you're willing to give them a 3-year contract. I went to the towns, this way they were worried they'd come back on, rates would go through the roof, and then wherever they left, like somewhere in Lisbon PD, that it would cause Lisbon to fold, that then they'd have nobody to go back to. So in order to get the buy-in, 3-year contract proposals to the town, and I think we've added 1 staff member since this, was just icing on the cake to, I guess, get those that were apprehensive back on. Where you had the fire departments, things like that, were very supportive of coming back to the county. And then we're working to capacity. So that's where the 3-year, I don't know if they'll continue doing that, but that's what we have to do to get momentum going in support for the comm center and bring in some revenue to offset the cost of upgrade. Because we'd have it here regardless, the PSAP purposes to all the surrounding towns, and to dispatch for our own patrolmen. So I don't know how you discount for that when you look at a fee for service, when you'd be operating, whether you weren't providing a service or not. But I understand what's being discussed.
So there have been 2 3-year term contracts offered so far. Okay. Are you all set, Mr. Pelletier?
Yeah.
Great. Any further questions? I have a motion in a second. All those in favor? It is unanimous.
Madam Chair, if I could just make a comment. We kind of breezed over Poland contracts, and it was mentioned several times. I just want to highlight that I commend Poland for what they are doing regarding contracted services. They are recognizing their use of service. They are hiring the additional personnel to make that coverage. I commend Poland for doing that. I would encourage, we do know that there are other communities, as the sheriff was talking about, there's a high demand without the state police coverage that is taking place, that's drawing those services to some communities because of their call volume. Those other communities, and I encourage the commissioners to either create a task force to evaluate this or to take some action to ensure that other communities that are having much more than what just World Patrol is to cover those costs and those expenditures.
I appreciate that comment, and I will absolutely pass that along when we pass this budget back to the county commission, because I believe the chair had to leave. Sheriff?
A commissioner from a certain area has offered to accompany me this fall to a town that is using a disproportionate amount of resources in the hopes of raising their awareness and maybe let the town know what's available to them. So hopefully we can encourage them to maybe bring it up as consideration at their town meeting. Because we have a town in the county that's using equal amount of call volume as a contracted town. So it creates hardship. And we think it could be just, they might not realize, and clearly the people in town wouldn't know. I don't know if it'll work, but usually let people decide on their own, and I would anyway, but I think being a little bit proactive to raise awareness of the situation is probably advantageous for us.
That's great to hear. I will still pass the note along. Anything further as we're looking at those? Sorry, I'm trailing off. Okay. So Vice Chair Ward and I talked about, so to Mr. Curl's point that one-time expenses might be the best place to look, we took a look at the capital expenditures sheet that was given to us today, and I think that would be the place where we might find, if we were looking for additional things to move out of operating expenses into that loss of revenue fund. So I just wanted to give folks a minute to take a look over that. And if we need to reconsider any budgets, I would take a motion to reconsider the budget, a vote on that in the affirmative, simple majority to look at taking out any items that we've already considered and voted through.
So Madam Chair, you're talking about this sheet here?
Yes.
So my understanding, because of what I had recommended earlier, that just because it's here, it's not necessarily in the budget.
Correct.
Correct? So it's hard for us to go through this and find out what we want to pull. That's what I did with the body armor, because it's listed on this sheet, but it wasn't in the budget.
Correct.
So I'm good with going through this sheet, but it would be helpful to know what's in the actual budget.
Could administration, or do you have that?
Yeah.
Mr. Ward has it.
Okay.
EMA is intact as presented. District Attorney, the revised sheet that Mr. Post has provided us is what is in the budget. Same with Treasury. Building is intact.
And stay intact.
That is in the budget.
Okay.
Then IT is correct. Sheriff.
The body armor.
Right. That's the exception. They gotta get to the 33.5 that I'm looking for. ignore the public safety for the sheriff because that's the 33.5 to Mr. Crowell's point. Computers, I don't know. I thought they got pulled. And the reserve account, I know got pulled because it was a different amount.
Computer 2,500s in here. Yeah, so computer is intact. Reserve account, I didn't check.
Reserve account, it's 20, the only amount that's there is 2,500 in the 7375 total. So if there's computers, it's 25 instead of the 9,000 that's listed total. Reserve account got cut. Civil is the vehicle at 7,500. In the comm, we took out the 7,000 previously. The other is simulcast radio, the debt service on that, so that doesn't relate. We're good.
What was that last thing you just said?
The simulcast is actually debt service. We already explored that when we did the last division, the 70,550.
All right, so open for this part of the discussion then would be all of EMA, all of DA, all of treasurer, building, IT. Sheriffs would be everything except for public safety and the reserve account.
I would ignore
Yeah.
everything after that
Public
because we've
safety.
already taken care of it previously.
So just the first page.
Correct.
Okay. Give everyone a minute to take a look, see.
Mr. Crowell. Clarification question, the DA copy or lease, that's an existing or a new? I don't remember, Andy.
I believe that's new. It's one that he said he had to replace. Yeah.
The budget line is the same as last year.
You don't happen to know how many years? 7,750 bucks, you can almost buy a copier. So I don't understand the purpose of a lease, I guess.
Lease being a capital expenditure.
53.
That's the second question.
Well, normally, it's not a capital expenditure, it includes paper and toner and all that stuff, so it's really, more than just leasing the machine. It supposedly also includes all the paper and toner you need for it. Most of these contracts.
It's listed as printing and reproducing.
That is listed as a monthly lease on the Konica BizHub 458 photocopier. It's $439 a month for that lease, and then,
That's all in, to Mr. Titus's point, so
Yeah.
it's not, ignore that one for this purpose.
there's also a quarterly usage in there, but I think we can just take that out still.
Clarice, yours is a new, right, the 6,000?
Yes.
That was a new. Same, the truck, ignore that because that's a recurring.
Truck replacement.
CCT, that's new, correct? We talked about that the first night, last week, I mean? The 12,000?
Under building facilities, CCTV cameras for $12,000.
It's a new expense?
That's a new.
New one time.
Did you say ignore the truck replacement? Is that the one you said?
Yeah, that's an annual amount to get, Dave's 4-year process to replace the truck.
2002 pickup.
He's made me a believer, it's the exception of the rule. IT,
IT didn't,
that was a new replacement, so that could be an easy target as well, too.
how much already got moved to ARP funding for IT, though? Is that somewhere in here?
There's something here, but,
It's not this.
Not the same.
well, we had
Okay.
some account funding software, IT modernization of cybersecurity, but
To start the discussion, Madam Chair, if I could make a motion that we transfer $155,208 from capital expenditures to the lost revenue, which would include the full amount from EMA, the full amount from district attorney minus the $7,750, full amount from the building department minus the $8,000, full amount from IT department.
Mr. Crowell?
Yes.
We need to take the 25 because we already cut the building reserve. I apologize.
Oh, yep. So it's only 12,000 from building?
Yes.
So minus the 25,000 as well. The 36,408 from IT. The 48 for under sheriff's department. The 4,000 out of computer software hardware and the 5,000 out of the reserve account, which would be a total of 130,208.
All right, we're gonna have to run through that again, Mr. Kroll, sorry. So, full amount of EMA at 10.3, full amount of, well, not full amount of district attorney.
12, 9, and 16.
12, 9, and 16, which is 14.5.
Yes?
You weren't touching treasurers.
No?
CCTV cameras at 12, IT at 36,408, 48,000 from sheriffs, and what else?
And then
4,000
the
from computer software.
4,000 out of computer software hardware.
Second page.
Yep.
And then the 5,000 out of the reserve account, which brings us to 130,208.
The only point that I would make on that, on the 7375 on the second page, that amount in the budget is 2,500. It's already been reduced from the $4,000, unfortunately.
What has?
The computers, the last item you listed, the 7375 stands at 2,500.
So take another 1,500 off from that.
I'm not finding the 73. Which one are you talking about?
7375 from the sheriff's, I'm not sorry. Yes, thank you, Mr. Rennie.
So that would be reduced by 1,500.
1,500, all right.
That's 2,500.
2,500.
Yeah.
But we've still got the 5,000.
No, the whole item, the whole account is only at 2,500 for those two items.
Okay, so then my number, Mr. Grohl, would be 134,800.
We're at 13208 minus 1,500.
That's the number I heard, too.
Oh, boy.
It's
So
okay.
that comes to
He's cranking it a
120,
second time.
it comes to 128,708.
That's what I have.
Okay.
128,708.
We have a second on that?
So,
Second.
From Mr. Rennie. Okay. We're gonna have to make sure we go over that again for the record, but, okay. And this is to put in lost revenue, is that correct, Mr. Grohl?
Correct.
Correct, okay. All right, any discussion? Yes.
I'm just trying to catch up. Did that include the 1075, 7310 portable radios?
One more time?
It did.
It did, that's debt service.
No, it didn't include the, well,
The 48,000 was in there.
yep.
So that really nice number that we started with, 155, is now down to 80,708.
Still got a second, though, right?
Yes.
That's the positive part.
What was it, Mr. Grohl?
The total? 80,708, putting back in portable radios.
It's something. All right, discussion on that move, or proposed move, I suppose. Seeing none, all those in favor? is unanimous. Move all those over. Okay.
I believe our running tally on lost revenue is now at 144,208, when taking the other two items that we had already mentioned of the 30,000 and then the 33,500. I could be corrected if it's not just those two
I'm not
items.
chasing that number at all.
So.
The one number that I'm chasing is we started the night at 103,500 as a net reduction of this budget. If I'm not missed something along the way, we're standing at net reductions at being 494,958. That's the soundbite plan.
And Mr. Kroll, can you run your number by me again?
The total that we moved to lost revenue? 144,208.
But that number.
That would be the 80,708 plus the 30,000 plus the 33,500 that was in public safety.
Okay.
And that completes any discussion associated with capital projects for tonight?
It would.
How about ARPA?
Mr. Post?
Obviously, we're continuing to look at that as we go forward, but the,
Anybody have any further questions, I guess, on ARPA?
I actually do. So can you explain really what line 6 for the commissioner meeting room, why that's truly needed? That seems like an awful lot of money for remote meetings as we look ahead and not behind.
oh, that is to do and quite frankly, I was shocked at the amount, but that's what they say. They were given an estimate to do so that we can do remote meetings and figure it out, not just remote, but
Why do we need it?
So it's more of this, but permanent and better. So we can record and broadcast and actually have a two-way conversation with the public, so they can remote in and have discussions with them during public meetings.
And again, that's only a verbal estimate at this point, but that's the proposed cost.
And did the county, sorry to jump on this, but did the county commission vote through a remote meeting plan?
We're voting on that next week.
And they are opting, or they intend to opt for the hybrid model?
Where the way the proposal is at current is that commissioners have to be there to vote if they're voting for, unless they have specific reasons they're away or they're sick. But then we will offer both to the public.
Wow, okay. Lewiston chose as a community to just go in person or all remote, so that saved us a lot of money.
Can I
Go ahead.
straw poll the rest? Is anybody else actually living in the hybrid model locally? Lisbon did the same for the same reason. And seeing it both from Lewiston's Finance Committee perspective in Lisbon, I don't want to open the door to actually now have interpretation of what somebody has for a viable option down the road. So the fact is, if you stick with just that one model, it's a lot simpler discussion. Everybody's either 100% virtual, like we were during COVID, to open up the hybrid, that's where that fee comes from for $150,000.
Anyone want to weigh in? Lewiston and Lisbon are looking to avoid that expense.
What do we have at Auburn Hall?
So exactly, we're not going a hybrid either, and for those same reasons, the costs are considerably high, and we don't see that it really justifies it for the limited time that you're going to use it.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So are you saying, Phil, that anybody who wants to participate, they have to physically be there?
Either, no, you can You can still Zoom somebody into a meeting. That doesn't prevent you from doing that. But if you're having public participation, then they're coming into the meeting. That's correct. Or everybody is going to be Zoom.
Yes.
Or whatever platform you're using.
And folks can still access via email, via phone,
Correct.
carrier pigeon, they can still reach public representatives. Call me, beat me. Are we voting on this?
Actually, it's beyond your.
Yeah,
You know, you can, we would gladly take any suggestions that you may have,
I would
but it's not part of,
suggest,
it's not part of the actual budget.
I would suggest that they cut that line, but,
That would be my recommendation as well.
Okay.
I
Seems
just,
like
I mean,
folks-
just because we have the money doesn't mean we have to spend it on stuff that doesn't make sense if you're looking at it 5 years from now. Hopefully, this is gone in another 6 months, and we don't have to talk about it, but I just think it's a sort of a waste of money.
Quite frankly, I prefer that if somebody's going to participate, they be in the room and not.
Yes.
Yeah,
Or nobody is, and you're
Yeah.
right back
Right.
where we were last year.
exactly, yes.
Mr. Kroll?
Just another, I agree, Larry, that I guess we're making suggestions. So the suggestion that I would have is that the county consider opening up a application process for community services that are being provided countywide. Other counties are doing that currently. They have an application process being submitted. I think a couple areas that I would, to highlight would be like Safe Voices, that is just opening up their new center on Lisbon Street and just launched their new campaign. I think would be beneficial for the county to allocate funds for that. That's a countywide region service that's being provided. Tri-County Mental Health would be the other one that I know that there's a definite need. I am certain Lewiston got a letter, Auburn got a letter, but I could see that as a countywide initiative that if the county was opening up applications, then these programs, much like our Androscoggin Head Start, could apply for those funds under the county budget. And then that way there it's being dispersed for the county.
Under the county
Are you-
ARPA funding?
Correct.
Okay.
I've been contacted by some, one actually that you referred to me. She's going to be getting back to me. Have a meeting next week with another and so we're looking at that, and we're going to figure out how to go forward.
I think that would be a great allocation of the $150,000.
I would echo that in that regard, is the number drops off when you get outside of LA, not being an enterprise center, the value in the smaller communities, they may not have that ability to tap.
That's
into
right.
it. The county could serve that level, and it
Right.
goes a huge way to be able to demonstrate what the level of government at the county level is doing for the people locally.
And I think I would further where I did read where a community had stated that because of the regulations with ARPA funds, they could not find, their town wouldn't be able to spend that. And that was out of Androscoggin County where that statement was made. That town could contribute those funds to the county to then allocate those costs to a social service that certainly had costs for COVID expenditures that would meet the eligibility requirements to help that community with offsetting those costs, but go towards the larger pool that could be going towards this potential grant opportunity, so.
Right. Any further comments on the ARPA funding list in front of us?
I have another
Yeah.
question. I know we talked a little bit about it briefly, but the line 8, the jail medical contract, that we're going to be able to use that money this year, but then next year that becomes part of the base line budget that we're going to be looking at as an ongoing increase. Is that correct?
Jail medical, yes, actually, that was in the jail budget, and we pulled it out because it would fit the ARPA money. And so that actually saved us those
This
dollars
year.
this year.
This year.
Because it's time that we really, we should have done it a couple of years ago, but
I think we could push that off for 3 years though, because this funding is allocated for till 2024.
Okay.
So.
Okay, that's it.
And I would also suggest that if that's a new program, correct? I think we should be monitoring, we should set up parameters to determine if this is a pilot program, what does that do for us by having the 24-hour coverage? Because currently, that coverage isn't there, that we're transporting that individual to the hospital. That still might be a cheaper cost in moving forward with this, but we at least have 3 years to evaluate this program, determine whether or not we want to bring it in as a continuous cost in 2025.
Good point.
Okay. I think that's all we're being asked to do with this budget, just comment on it. So we've got to jump back. Did we do all our revenues yet, Mr. Ward? What do we got left?
You want to cover revenues? We can cover revenues.
Do it.
If you guys want to go to that revenues tab, I can give you score. First one on the list, estimated surplus. If you want to tackle that one, Larry's actually made a recommendation to bring us to a level of 150 from 2021's value of 380. Again, his soundbite that making sure it was a conscious effort by both here and the commissioners last year to come in at 0, which is higher amount than typically there. So we're restoring it to more in the line of what has historically been there, which is typically between 100 and 250,000. What I would point to on this is it's not in the reserves per se, but the fund balance. The one piece that I would point to in the 6 years that I've been sitting here, that I've been keeping track associated with that, 2016, when I stormed out of a commissioners meeting, when they were actually making the case to rate that number to go to 0, they stood at $477,000. That number has increased to $1,067,000 this year, and it's grown every year. The point that was actually made during the course of that meeting, where it broke up at 1 o'clock in the morning, was that Norm Beauplant expressed that the fact that you're going to ride bell curves, there's going to be highs and lows. Not every year is actually going to be a growth year where you actually grow your fund balance, but it actually covers the deficits associated with that with other leaner years. But the point that I would offer is first year it increased by 120,000. Next year after that, 264,000. Then you have a lean year. It grew by 19,000. Last year, associated with that, it was 187,000 that it increased. This year may be one of those leaner years, to Larry's point, but you were still $250,000 higher than we were in a position where previous leadership under the commissioners didn't give a damn and they were willing to cut it to 0. I would make the recommendation that if we are looking for additional revenue sources, this is one that actually could be higher than Mr. Post's recommendation. I would say 200,000 to be.
But out of the $1 million that we have,
680.
we spent 380,000 for this year's, so that brings us down to 600,000.
Larry's coming in at 680,000 by his own accord associated with that. But my point is still the same, is the fact that I'm willing to hear what he is trying to express, but I believe this may be one of those years coming off a good audit year. I would make the recommendation, the least cost effect on this budget would be to increase the estimated surplus amount by $50,000 to 200,000. I apologize.
Is that a motion?
That is my motion.
I'll second that.
I need you to repeat that, I'm sorry.
9,000 revenue, estimated surplus, plus $50,000 to 200,000.
Thank you, and that was a motion by Mr. Ward, seconded by Mr. Rennie. Further discussion? Mr. Post? No, you're.
His point is well-
I've made
it's been
my,
well said.
you know,
Okay.
because with $1 million, and we've already used 380 of it, and I'm supposed to have over 2 million, and I'm not getting there very fast. And this doesn't help, but that's all I'll say.
Further discussion? Questions? All right, all those in favor? Oops. All those opposed? Motion passes 11-2. Do you want to merge on?
The next one, transfer county reserve, 9,000. Yeah, the account's 9,000. Again, Larry is recommending, I apologize, the title, Mr. Post, is actually recommending 0 for the same reasons. What I would point to associated with this in the reserves line, or tab, I apologize, find the tab, it's right following. There is a restricted fund balance, contingency, or county reserves, I forget which is the line item. There is adequate funding to be able to consider this at the level that has historically been done of $100,000. I would make that recommendation tonight.
Got a motion from Mr.
I
Ward,
will second that as well.
seconded by Mr. Rennie. Can you run that number again, 100,000?
Yes, 100,000 charging transfer county reserves.
Mr. Post, would you like to plead your case again? Ditto, before, okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Passes 11-2. Onward.
Revenue account 9100, real estate transfer tax. If you look at we're tracking significantly higher than the $160,000, because to date, we're already at $160,000. I did the same logic. Clarice can correct me if it's actually not a direct line. If you take, assuming there's 8 months in there, and you look at adding an additional 80,000 on top of that, I am assuming that we would actually, on line to actually be closer to 240,000 this year.
Is that correct to take this out 8 months of revenue and we expect 4 more months at the same pace? Okay.
I would make the motion then that increasing 9,100 real estate tax by 80,000 to 240,000.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ward, seconded by Mr. Rennie to bump 9,100 to $240,000. Any discussion? Mr. Roebuck?
I was just going to say, that's more than we have taken in from an actual for the past couple of years, so my recommendation would be to increase it, but not that high.
Yeah, I'd say maybe 210 is more comfortable.
I was going to go 208.
208, wow.
Yep.
I like round numbers.
210. I gave him 210.
That's still
And
high.
again, I'm not, this is a revenue that would be like interest with Clarice, the fact that it's just a target number, and the fact is, we may not get there, but I don't, it's clearly, we're already at 160,000 for the year. Sorry, please
Can I
head
just
so.
make a point that, in the Register of Deeds, when she was here, I think, spoke on this, this has been an exceptional year because of COVID. So that, the fact that it may happen next year, we don't know. So please keep that in mind.
I will take the friendly amendment and go at 50. Mr. Rennie?
I would say, I would adjust my second.
Okay, so we're at 210 then.
Is that more palatable?
Yes.
I saw Mr. Roebuck.
That's the direction I was going.
Pelletier.
I just need to know what that is. What is a real estate transfer tax?
What does that represent?
I can explain.
Oh, we got some real estate.
It's the one item in all this book that I understand.
Expertise, we love it.
State real estate transfer tax, every time something's proposed, is a $4.40 tax divided equally between the buyer and the seller. And for every $1,000 of a purchase, so for example, a $100,000 house sale, there's $220 from each party that gets sent over to the registry. This was an exceptional year, as she said. This isn't going to continue to happen. Interest rates have already started to creep up just a little bit, but they're going to keep creeping. They've been down too low. And at the end of October, there is we could see a gigantic increase of housing come on the market. And if that happens, then prices are going to go down. People won't be paying the $20,000 more than asking price just for the fun of being in it. And prices will go down and we'll be in a worse situation. I've seen this, I've done it for 33 years, I know how the market goes. It goes up and it goes down, it goes up. So that's my take on it. So I definitely think that number was too high, and I'd even go lower myself, but that's my opinion.
How low would you go, Mr. Morgan?
I'd probably go back to the 160,
Yeah, okay.
170.
Mr. Titus?
Thank you. I would, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. This is not going to continue the way it's currently going. But I do look at 2018, which is almost 200,000, and 2019, that was over 200,000. And say that, you know, maybe this year we're going to be at 240 or in that range, but we're going to tail back to a more normalized year, which is closer to 200 than it is 160. So that's why I would kind of go with the friendly amendment of 210, because I do think that we're at a level and we're going to stay at that level, maybe not as high as the 240, but I would be comfortable with the 210 for that, based on looking at 2018 and 2019.
Okay.
And
A Goldilocks approach.
yes.
Yes. Any further discussion before we take our vote on 210 for line 9100? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 10-3. All right. 9260?
Yes.
9260.
I guess I have a question between jail contractor custodial and jail contractor IT. These are internal amounts that are actually, when's the last time they were adjusted?
I think it was a year of, it's been 6 years.
Dave's staff aren't working any cheaper associated with that I don't believe that is a reflective amount in that
But
regard.
the bottom line is, if you add money in that revenue, then it goes, you have to add money to the jail expenditure account.
Correct. So it's a push, either way you accept it, but it's still an internal number.
Right.
I will make the recommendation that those two items actually remain as is, but I would like to see what the true cost of that service is for something to address it next year in the budget.
That is non-binding request.
And the last item that we yet to tackle would be 9775, interest on investments. Again, we have a budgeted 5,000, and year-to-date, we're already at 32,800. It's a wild card because actual from 2018 was 13,000, 2019 was 26,000, 2020, 20,000. Why is it so low now? And Where are we at on that one, Clarice?
Well, the current year, the interest rate took a nosedive. I'm getting like, not even 1%.
But clearly, we're gonna be above the budget. And 4 months into it, I'm not confident interest rates are gonna stay at that historic low to the point that's actually made. I just heard that at a recent credit union meeting, is that there may be movement on interest rates as well. I have a figure that's higher than that. I would actually like to increase that one by 5,000, but it's immaterial at this point, given the other concerns that have already been addressed, so I could go either way with that.
If I could make one point on this, is that Clarice, correct me if I'm wrong, but the interest on the $20 million for the ARPA funds is a separate, you can earn that interest and it sits in your account. The expenditure of that interest does not have to align with any ARPA funding. So there will be some interest that will start accruing on that $20 million that could assist, add to this line item.
Then I'll go with my original motion. My original motion was, I would like to increase 9775 by $15,000 to bring it to 20, if that's the case, because if we get that interest on that 20 million.
I don't think it's that gonna be high, right, Clarice? What would the interest be? We don't know what that is.
Yeah, well, we don't, first off, we don't have the whole 20 million at once.
Right, it's 50%. Yeah.
So I think that would be a little high, my
Off the back.
I don't know.
I would second that motion.
Okay.
But is there a lesser number? I mean, I don't want to be unreasonable either.
I think they're not gonna spend that money right out the gate. It could be slightly high, but if you look at how we've been tracking,
We're clearly going to be above the number
Right.
that's going to be $5,000.
So you're only adding 15, because now these funds just came into question, so I think 20 is reasonable when you add it to what was already there.
So we've got a motion and a second to bring revenue line 9775 to 20K. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 12-1. Mr. Ward, did we go over 9525 already?
Rental of office space, I believe that's actually covered on, what office space is that?
The
DA's office.
the Historical Society and the state space that they use for their court officers.
So it's a multi-year lease, and that number doesn't change, and that's where the history comes in as well, so I'd make the motion to leave that as is.
Okay. We didn't tackle jail contractual or IT either. Do you want to lump those all in, just for keeping as is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I made no other adjustments.
Sure. All right, I have a motion from Mr. Ward. Do I have a 2nd?
I'll second it.
Desiree. Any further discussion on keeping those 3 lines as is? Seeing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous. All right. So, let's do some quick adjustments, so we've got a number here. All right.
$215,000.
Is what we added?
Yes.
Wow.
How much?
I thought we added more than that.
165.
100?
$215,000, he's right.
Wow.
Yep, 250.
Oh,
I got 215.
215.
Was there more to that?
No.
3. So our revenues would then be totaled at $2,169,201. And supportive prisoners, $2,529,114.
And that includes the 200,000 increase, right?
Yes. To other reserve?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
For the listening public, I have the accumulation drop of, on this budget, 709,958, if my math is correct, which puts us below a 6% threshold, which is very close.
That's awesome.
So we have a bit more to do, because we need to make sure that Clarice, Ms. Lester and Mr. Post have the same numbers that we do to approve the budget as whole for the public hearing. Are we comfortable with taking a motion to approve the budget as amended, and they will get the exact numbers to us in subsequent days?
I would make that motion.
Okay, great.
I'll second it.
Everyone wants to do that. I'm gonna go with Kroll Rennie, because
Yeah, no,
I like it. And that's gonna be for revenues and expenditures, everything, whole kit and caboodle. We'll give it to administration, and they'll get us some numbers soon. Any further comments?
Public hearing on the 20th of October.
Yes. All right, hearing none, to take as amended this 2022 budget. All those in favor? That is unanimous, 13-0. As Mr. Ward just said, we do have a public hearing on October 20th. It's been well attended in the past couple of years, so I'd encourage folks to try to be here, but it's a pretty quick meeting usually. After that, if we move forward with this budget, I'll take it to the county commission on November 3rd for their consideration. I'll include those notes that we talked about, including Sheriff's Department, ARP funding. I might send the ARP funding email actually probably tomorrow, because I think they might act on that stuff sooner. If there's anything else folks think of before the 20th or before the 3rd, please reach out to me and Mr. Ward. I'm in class a lot of the time, so he might see an email earlier than I do, which might be helpful. All right,
So October 20th is the next time, and that'll be the public hearing.
6 p.m., same place, same time, same smiling faces.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be on the budget committee with everybody, and appreciate
We'll come to
everybody's
the
input.
20th.
I'm going to be
Say
here
our
on the
goodbyes.
20th for sure, but yeah.
Okay.
I think it's just a lot of hard work, and I appreciate it.
It truly is. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Rennie, Roebuck, sure. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great job, everyone. It's unanimous.